Okay, oh shit, I didn't even realize there were so many people in the room. Okay, so anyone who wants to come up now. I'm just sharing the DM or the post or whatever. I'm just making a retweet of it so we at least can promote it a little bit. And then we will officially start. Matt is coming up as my co-host. We'll say that John, Solar, who else? Ram is here. Okay, Beth is here. Anyone who wants to come up, please come up. But we just lost Ron, but I'm sure he'll come back. And we're not quite started, so just give me a moment, guys. I'm sorry, I apologize. A little behind, but not really.
Do you guys know if it in the recording does it
Mhm.
sound as it sounds for a listener or a speaker? Because I feel like Jin's mic is pretty low from the audience perspective, but then the speaker like audio is handled differently, and he's mic'd fine. I'm just trying to make sure the experience is good for most people.
No, this is a good question. I'm actually using a mic tonight, so that might be why, or it is just that it sounds a lot better when you're a speaker. So I'm not sure.
Do you know if the mic is connected on X? Isn't like you're actually using the mic and not some default? Like
It should be. I can hear you. Like it should be.
Yeah, no, you sound good, man. I was just saying your
Okay.
levels sounded low overall.
No,
Before
I
you
totally get
accepted
it.
me up.
Well, hopefully that will be remedied because I have a whole new setup coming next week. So any technical issues with the show or with doing spaces should be at least partially rectified. But no, I'm glad you tell me this because this is something that I'm really thinking about working on just for my show and for us as a group is the technical side is that I need to improve. So I appreciate all the notes and I don't take it personally at all. And I'm glad for them. I welcome them. I know I can be mercurial at times, but not about things like that. Okay. So we are reading Donald Michael Craig, and we are going to do a proper introduction, and I will do that in a moment. Did I send myself the thing? I'm sorry. I promised I was doing something. I was organizing all my photos so I could do a cool one for our promo. But I may not have sent myself the thing. Okay, well, that's okay. Okay, so just if Matt or Solar, you guys want to say anything before we start, please do. I'm just going to send myself the PDF of the book, which I should have done before. Apologize, guys. Usually I'm a lot more on top of it, but okay, there we go. Okay, there we go. PDF, and the PDF version copy is also in the thing as well, guys. Just so you know. So if anyone wants to read it, and we can also nest it, no problem, in the chat. So we have Chris here. So let me shout Chris out first before we officially start. So I just recorded like a 2.5 hour marathon. Avatar: The Last Airbender, Book of Fire, super fun. Shout out to Joshua the Branch for hooking us up. And yeah, so and I saw Matt was posting about Total Recall. So Matt, think about that. If you want to come on and talk about Total Recall, I'd love that. Um, because nobody wants to do those Arnold movies with me. It's very hard to find people who want to do like film reviews in the sense of like those movies because the hipster millennial podcasters have all done them. So nobody thinks that we can bring something new, but I know for a fact, like if you and I were together, or Solar and I were together, or just me solo, I know we could do something. So yeah, think about
for
that.
sure.
And if anyone has any ideas that they want to do movies, hit up Chris or hit up me because that's great. That's honestly great stuff for the show. Okay.
Yeah, that would be amazing actually, because like right now what I do is I don't even watch movies anymore. I just like look for Kabbalah in them. even like I don't know, some crazy shit movie. at the end I get something still, it's super cool. So it's always a new point of view.
So honestly, I don't know if this is probably not for me, but this is the only way I also watch films now. But series animation is a little better for me because I can kind of suspend my disbelief a little bit. And then I kind of think about it later, and then I can sort of understand what's going on. But so it is harder for me. But I can watch old things. Like I can watch things that I've already seen. That's totally fine. But it's very difficult for me to watch new things and not notice, as they say, as the kids say, as the Groypers say. So we will start. So I am Jin the Ninja. I host a show called Threshold Saints. This is the Grey Lodge Plus Ultra presents Friday Night Gnostic Mass. I entitled this episode Aeon of the Magi. Now, I should, if I was really smart, should have used Aeon with an I, because that would have been an interesting, I think, English gematria or English Kabbalistic sort of remix of the title. But regardless, a vowel is a vowel. So we will progress forward. And so this is a speculative ontological space. We believe magic's real. It's a plus ultra space. Magic affects reality. Reality affects magic. Politics is magic. Media is magic. Our thoughts are magic, if we so will it to be. So that's pretty much where we start. We talk about Tantra, Kabbalah, astrology, politics, media, and of course, we are going to resume book club starting today. I have the book in front of me. I have my notes in front of me, Solar. So we are good. So let's start room shout outs. So we've got Matt as my co-host, Matt Mora, who did an amazing 3.5 hour show on Great Horn Pagan Podcast with Stein Fox. And Matt also will be coming on Threshold Saints very soon, as well as Solar and John and Ram if he wants to, and Chris, obviously, because we are doing a series together. There's Joseph and there's Beth. And sorry, let me continue. So, Solar, we have our Zen Kabbalah bro. Very much appreciated. We have John, who is our resident astro. Wouldn't function without him, wouldn't really work without someone who is really great at astro. Obviously, Matt is great at many things as well, Kabbalah, tarot, and I am slowly teaching him, indoctrinating him, you could say, into my tantric ways. Of course, that is also true for Solar, but I have to do it in a more gentle way because he is he already has his own opinions of the world. Of course, Beth, our flower power girl, thank you for coming. Joseph Reed, thank you for coming. Really appreciate it. I'd love to see. I know you've come to a few spaces, but I love to see. Room engagement it makes it worth it. Our last space had over 300 repeat listens, so good fucking job, boys. Because it was mostly Matt and Solar the last time, and Joshua, of course. But I mean, obviously, it's a little bit of the Jin show, a little bit, but I try and temper it. And then, of course, we have Sri Vidya, Gnostic Wisdom Master, Ram, our Singaporean brother. And we love Ram. I love Ram. I just, I see a lot of myself at 22. Also in Matt, of course. I mean, that's obviously true as well, but also in Ram. And I was a little more, because I'm Asian, so I'm a little quieter. I'm a little more, that's how I was when I was 22 anyway. I wasn't really quiet. It was very wild inside my mind, but quiet in the outer presentation. So you could say I was going through my Mahayana phase, maybe. And of course, we have Chris from the King of Cups YouTube channel. So if you are interested in his work, which is extensive and varied and is not just limited to occult film reviews, but to a wide variety of political and occult and spiritual ideas, particularly around the modern sort of the hero's journey and the modern man. So of interest to especially the boys in our space. I know this is a topic that has come up with all of us, speaking with all of us. Like, what is the example for the modern man? So Chris, he at least presents a map. He has great ideas. He's a great dude. So check him out if you're interested in that. And of course, we will just shout out a couple room people who Didn't come, but it's okay. So we have Avi. So she's probably working. It's probably quite early for her. We have Shakti from Japan, who's our yogini. We also have, I know I'm missing people. I'm so sorry. I'm just completely blanking. But alas, they're not here. So if they come in, I will, of course, shout them out. And let's talk about. I did have a magic. I don't know if it's magical practice, but I did tease a little bit of it in the chat where I said I had a magical. It's a visualization, a meditation, you could say, like the much more. It's not. It sounds a lot more transgressive than it really is. But we'll do book club first. I think Solar is waiting for it, and I'm also waiting for it. And I have to say also, thank you to the lodge for letting me do this, for letting me be your co-host slash navigator through these spaces. Of course, I'm not the only co-host, but I am a co-creator, at least, because it happens in synthesis. It happens with all of us. It's kind of how the spaces work. They don't. If it was just me monologuing, it wouldn't really work. That's not really what it is. I could just do that on my own show. So we do this so we can create a moment in space through sound, right? That's the secret fifth thing. The Vajra clap, the great thunder clap that resounds throughout pristine space. That's exactly what we do every single time we do these spaces on an app that references space, and it was like very Ketu. We just had an earthquake. I mentioned that earthquakes. John, I think, or HR Buddy HD said that earthquakes always come in twos. There was one in Nepal last month. Now there is one in Burma and Thailand. Well, as we always say, there's a head of the dragon and a tail. So the head wags the tail. So yeah, I think that's totally what we're seeing. We're seeing the shifting polarities. That doesn't mean necessarily the poles, but I think we're seeing shifting and crazy transits. Obviously, we have our Saturn, Neptune, the craziness that causes. I think that I've begun to see that the tumultuousness is not just me, although I take responsibility for my, you know, behavior during that time. But I think that for me, I have, at least for now, maybe I won't say that because maybe it's a little too soon. But I think in many ways I have thought through some of the blocks I was having. So I'll just say that. So I'm feeling very positive. The spaces always make me feel positive. The last three, I have felt invigorated. I have felt walking. I didn't think they were my best spaces. Like I didn't think that like my showing. Obviously, Matt and Soul are always good. Joshua's always good. I didn't think they were my best spaces, but I did think that wow, we actually did something really fucking cool. We're talking about magic very openly, and we don't shy away from real discussions of what that is. We're doing it for free, no paywall, no nothing, totally accessible to the masses should they so choose. It's part of the reason I call it Friday Night Gnostic Mass. And I think that for however long we keep it going, I think it's a worthwhile endeavor, and I think it's really been interesting. And I'm not sure if I'm aware of other spaces like this. I'm just not quite the same. Yeah, there of course there's other discords and there's other this and other that, but I think for us and like how we are thinking or we are doing it, I think is very different. And I think is interesting. And I would like to say that I think we are a Gnostic space. Like, yes, obviously I'm Buddhist. We do Dharma. But there is, Gnosticism is multivariant, has many faces. So I think we bring at least what a potentiality of what Gnosticism could be. So in some ways it is true. Like it is a Friday night Gnostic Mass because we always reference Gnostic texts because you have to, because we're heterodox, and so we reference those things. So I know that was a long intro, but we shall start reading Donald Michael Craig, Modern Magic. So we will start, I think, unless Solar has a particular place to start, we will start at the beginning because I think that is an interesting and logical place to start. Actually, we're going to do magical. We're going to do the visualization first. I think that's interesting. Okay. So I know this is different for us, but I think it's going to be interesting. It's really easy. It's really short. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. This is just an idea. This is speculative space. Everything we talk about is just an idea. Of course, sometimes we do want to apply will to it, which is sort of also the point of our space, is to learning to bring air into a place of both will, love, and mercy, bodhicitta, loving kindness. So I'll try to do that. So let me just say that first. So it's not really magic, but it is a magical idea. Okay. So put your hands all the way in front, palms facing up. On your right hand, you are to imagine a KJV Bible or a Torah, solar, if you want. Either or, whatever, it doesn't matter. But it's an Orthodox text. It's the Bible. It's the KJV. It's I mean that's what we're doing. So just to do that, even if you're not Christian, it's okay because well, you'll find out in a moment. So you want to think of the weight of the book. So you are really holding the book. You want to know what it smells like. You want to know what the pages, the texture of them, the sort of outside pages, like when the book is closed. You want to still know what that feels like. You want to know what it smells like. You want to know what the pages say. Imagine as much detail as you can. The color of the Bible, it doesn't really matter. Yes, of course, in Kabbalah, color matters. But for this, it doesn't really matter. If you want to do purple or you want to do blue, that's an idea, just a suggestion. Okay, so you're holding it. You should feel the balance, feel the weight. It should be real in front of you, holding in your hand. In your left hand, outstretched, palm up, you are going to imagine the greater and lesser keys of Solomon. Now, if you don't know what that looks like, that's okay. You just have to imagine the book filled with secret knowledge. Just entitle it in your mind, visualize in your mind the greater and lesser keys of Solomon. If you want to be really pedantic about it, you can say it's the Stephen Skinner copy. So, but imagine it in your hand, hardcover. You're holding it. Imagine the smell, the texture, the material, the weight. And then what are you going to do? You're going to carry the right hand and you're going to put it over top of the left and you're going to clap. Okay? Then you're going to take a breath and you're going to imagine you've put the texts back together. So you've married the Orthodox and the heterodox together. So you are fully ready, fully prepared, fully initiated into non-dualism, or at least what we're going to talk about in a non-dual way, which is how we sort of discuss magic, how we're going to approach this book, and how we've approached all the books that we've done. Okay, so now that the book is compiled, just let it go into space. Just let it go. You put something together, and you're just going to let it fly away. Maybe the book transforms into a dove, and it flies away. Maybe you watch it fly away. That's an interesting idea. Flying away into the sun. Why? Because you don't really need to know. Yes, because we have those texts already. They already exist. So the ideas are already in the world, just like the seeds are already in the world. So we can also let it go. So anyways, I don't know if that was cool or not cool, but interesting. And I think it makes sense for how we, do the space and how we do Grey Lodge, because we are gray magicians, basically. Drawing from both hands and making something of it and keeping the three, at least you could say four noble truths or the trivium, or it's some kind of formulation of how you're orienting yourself to not necessarily goodness, but to justice. I think that's a good way to frame it. So fairness and a balance and a mercy in the world, as we always talk about. Okay. So, yeah, that was a little embarrassing, but I don't know. I thought it sounded cool in my head, so we tried something different, or I tried something different. Okay. So we will start. So we are in the introduction, modern magic. So I'm starting from a paragraph that I've marked. Many magical rituals will be given in these lessons for you to practice. These should aid you in your psychic and magical development. However, even though thousands of people throughout history have successfully shown their proficiency in magical techniques, quite frankly, I cannot guarantee your success. This is because the ability to perform magic successfully is dependent upon what you put into it. Many people, however, have told me of their great successes using the traditional techniques given in these pages. The best way to use this book is to go through it page by page, studying each of the ideas and practicing each of the techniques as they come up. Let me make clear at the outset that this course will not teach black magic in quotations. You will not be required to do anything contrary to your moral or ethical values. You will not be summoning up or any devils, demons, or evil entities. Some people who are pagans, Wiccans, or witches frequently criticize those who claim to be ceremonial magicians by saying all they do is talk and read. They claim that magicians don't do much magic. Unfortunately, I find myself in total agreement with them, but if you follow the instructions on the following pages, step by step, you will be that unique and rare individual, a practicing ritual magician. Donald Michael Craig. So, why I read that intro was obviously I don't have to say all that then, but also because I think his perspective is interesting. He's specifically looking to train you in ceremonial magic, but as we will explore, he actually covers a wide variety of different magical systems, ideas, thinking, not necessarily in the post millennial way, where it's like multicultural, it's like all this, like these systems, these systems, but it is for the time that it was published, it was quite not syncretic, but it has a variety of techniques. It's modern, so I think that's important to keep in mind. I think it's also important to keep in mind that the as all ceremonial magic does, it has a Judeo-Christian framework. That's totally fine. No problem there. We've talked about it a million times, doing Kabbalah on Sundays and also doing Kabbalah every space. So this makes perfect sense. I have no problem with the Tiveratic Christ consciousness. I think it's interesting. I think we all think it's interesting. It's a great place to be. It's at least one of the higher potentialities in sort of contemporary magical thinking, at least in the outer degrees. So it's totally fine. So it's great. It's also right. We talked about this the last space. Is that I said I wanted to bring things more into Tiferet, things more into balance, things more into harmony, and I think that that's also what that is. That doesn't mean your consciousness should stay there. I'm not necessarily saying it shouldn't stay there. If that's the terminus of your system, that's fine. Stay there. But if you want to go higher, if you want to go to Dath, where his skull really is, I mean, let's be honest. That's where his, his crown of thorns really is. It's at death. But, there are other potentialities and possibilities on the tree. So, but Tiferet is, it's in my, I know. If Joshua was here, him and Solar could totally gang up on me and say, Jin, like you're preferencing Tiferet over like Gevra and like I'm just I'm a Vajra dude. I like the figure eight. I like the synthesis. I like the lightning. I like the fire. I like the ocean. I like the storm. That's what I like. So it has to be in synthesis for me. Can't be overburdened with anything, either fire or water. I like meat in the middle, as they say. And so yeah, I think that's an interesting way to approach thing because that's obviously my perspective. So I will try. I will probably through osmosis relate some of his work in that way. Okay, so we continue. Okay, so I guess I shouldn't do that. Okay, so he is going to go through a ton of things, okay, so we'll just talk, I'll just read the thing. Some of the topics to be covered include the tarot divination, the history of tarot, the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, the banishing ritual of the hexagram, the middle pillar ritual, the circulation of the body of light, the watchtower ritual, meditation, the tree of life, the three pillars, the four Kabbalistic words, the history of Kabbalah, gematria, Notarikon, which is the mysticism of letters, Temera, Bible interpretation, talismans, astral traveling, pathworking, healing, the Keys of Solomon, magical rituals that you can design for any purpose, sex magic, and much more. Okay, so you guys know, probably I'm going to skip the sex magic stuff, but that's fine. If you want to read it, you have the PDF and have fun. Okay, so what I think is interesting is he's going to cover basically the sort of intro. I would say if you had a third degree in the Astrum Argentum, you'd pretty much know all the stuff that you would know all the things that he basically said. So I think that's it's for work. I think it's quite comprehensive. I think it's interesting. And I also want to say that yes, each ritual has been remade, rewritten, edited, remixed. There we go. Joshua, the branch. Shouted you out several times, brother. I did not see you. I apologize. We are reading Modern Magic by Donald Michael Craig. The link is in the chat. I'm just reading a little introduction. So, what was I saying? Okay, well, regardless of that,
The rituals were remixed and so on.
Oh, thank you so much, Matt. So yeah, they've all been remixed. We know from the source. I know from various people in Temple Set now. They've all been remixed a million times. They've all been rewritten. It is what it is. It does it fit exactly what the Golden Dawn like high rank manual says? No, probably not. But if there's efficacy in it, or if there are small errors, then you should learn to do the ritual in fullness, and then you can see where he went wrong. So you should be able to logic proof your way to a correct sort of working. That's sort of the idea in all magic, is that they will give you the idea, give you the kind of contour of the form, and then you kind of have to fill it up yourself. That's sort of both the challenge and the problem, because you see people fill it. They fill the vessels with their own ideas. That's not the point. It's not to fill it with your own ideas. It's to fill it with that non-dual gnosis, that kind of pristine diamond thunder thinking, plus will, blue-green. You are filling the vessel with blue-green, but also with bodhicitta. So you're letting it go and be empty. So you're not really creating vessels. That's sort of, you are just using the vessels as a container. You are borrowing them, but you are not really making klipas, and you are not trying to make aggregation on purpose. Okay? So that may happen later, but for the most part, I think that, you want to treat it as conceptually as possible. See where if you disagree with him, that's okay. I disagree with him in lots of places, more in the theory part, because I don't know any, like, I obviously know what all of those things are, and I know Kabbalah to a degree, but in terms of ritual magic, that was never something that I was really into. If you give me the Seals of Solomon, I can consecrate those babies. I could probably do like 3 a day, honestly, in the right astrological conditions, because I'm quite good at it. Like, I can read the oration, I can make my own planetary incense, I can do all the recitation, I can do the oil consecration, I can do the invocations to the archangels. But in terms of actual proper ceremonial magic, like how someone who was in the OTO, well, actually most of the people in the OTO are pretty retarded, so not everyone, but a significant degree of them. And then, but that's the same for all magical societies in some ways. It's like you have the kind of standout people, or the people that they know what the fuck they're doing, and then you have a bunch of people who don't know what the fuck they're doing, and that may or may not be predicated on their own potential. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just the inevitable result of having like not a great teacher, or and also magical experience. Magical experience can actually fill in a lot of blanks. It's just important to not rely on those magical experiences as a source of knowledge. Why is that? Because, as I mentioned, the further you are away from your magical experience, the further it will seem in your memory, the more elusive it will be, that same experience, because it's almost impossible to have that same experience again. So that is also why you need the practical text element, the study. So if that is a Bible, if that is the Gnostic text, if that is the grimoires, if that is a Tantra, if that is the sutras, if that is the Torah or Sefer Yetzirah or like the Zohar or whatever it is, you need to have also the text to back you up. And it will also prove things in your magical experience. It should not be unverified personal gnosis. This is something that once my sort of experiences changed and they became actually metaphysically profound, where I could understand that I was traveling on the Sephira, or through the Sephira, excuse me, or the Sephira, and through the tree. Yes, Matt, please go ahead.
No, just finish it. You're saying something?
Well, yes. Just as I was going through the tree, I just realized that yes, you can actually use the text to make sense and also fill in the blanks of your own sort of what you've seen, perceived. So it should not be so distinct from the text. This is also why we don't have to discuss this today, but this is also why some of the Joe Rogan stuff that you will hear parapolitical people discuss about psychedelics, this is also why that's a problem. Because you don't want to fill in the blanks with unverified personal gnosis. You don't want to base your experiences off of the experiences that other people have had that are not relatable in text. Simply because unless they are a very excellent teacher, like you can really trust them, like a guru almost. Unless they're that, I would say take other people's experiences for what it's worth, but use Kabbalah or use Tantra or use one of the methodological systems to explain it, and the other people who have had those same experiences will, in general, understand. It's the meeting of wisdom and method. You're bringing in the method of the wisdom of experience with the method outlined in the text. It's how I communicate with all of you. I hope I am cogent, coherent, makes sense, and I think it's a good way for other magicians to communicate with each other, in my experience. So in my experience with other magicians, not just in podcasting, but in real life, this has actually become, I've noticed it. So maybe I didn't notice it before. Maybe I didn't recognize the things they were saying. Maybe I didn't understand. But now I understand a lot more. So yes, try and balance those things out. And having magical experiences will help fill out some of the gaps in knowledge. But just it's really important to not rely on them overly. But yes, to a degree, yes, have them. You should want them in the sense that it's an incredible experience, and that's really where all the potential is. So, sorry, Matt, please go. Sorry, I went on a little long that time.
No worries at all. I'm just gonna like expand on what you're saying because I completely agree. It's you're balancing Netsa and HOD. You cannot have just Netsa, just the experience without HOD. Otherwise, it's lost, right? You lose all the thing. And if you think about it, it's again like the two brains, or even something else you can do is when you have an experience that you can prove by having someone else sharing that experience. So, for example, you may have a dream or like astral projection that you actually meet someone there, that when you wake up you can talk to the person about the experience and they'll relate like, oh yeah, I saw that, and like maybe from a slightly different point of view or whatever, but you can relate that. Like even the other day I had a dream, it was normal, like to me I just noted down as one, and then my sister messaged me saying like, oh, I had this weird dream about you, and then I connected to the one I had, and I told her like, wait a second, I had this same shit today. Like, did we meet or something? Then you can have this kind of things, because otherwise it's like it's more or less the problem we have, I would say, also with science nowadays, because we just have the logical, just have the left brain, almost no ludic. So then you lose, you just have hard, it fucking breaks because you don't have the balance, right? So I definitely agree with you on that. So you got to balance both, do the experience, create a method, and vice versa.
Absolutely, it's completely. I know I use this word a lot, but it is very dialectical. I think it's like if if you want to call it like a relationality instead of dialectic, sure, that's fine. I think that makes a lot of sense too, and I think that's a lot of how the sages thought of it, like the relationship between the things. And again, we don't want to be overly clockwork universe about it, but I think that there is something useful in sort of understanding the minutiae, at least between the paths, between especially those two separa, because those ones are, in particular, in my opinion, very, very, very important. And obviously, they do play a role in my sort of speculative prophecy, we'll say. So I'm calling it that, but maybe that's a, kind of lame-o, but the Aeon of the Daughter. So that whole series, I think that played a lot. Hod obviously is a big part of that. Obviously, Geburah is. Obviously, Hesed is. Obviously, Netzach is. Obviously, Yesod is. Obviously, Malkuth is. But I think that the lower tier, well, lower, I think it is going to be a lot more important in the upcoming time. So, Matt, please go ahead.
Now, it's very funny that you say that, because on Papu's tarot, you can connect the star, which is the path between Netzah and Hod, with Aquarius and the age of Aquarius, right? The Aeon of the Daughter. So it makes a lot of sense what you're saying from my perspective.
So this is not just from me, though. This is also from Sachki, and this is also from learning from both you, Matt, Solar, and Joshua, of course, and also from John, because like I'm not an astrologer, as I often say. Like, yes, I do understand tantric astrology, and Ram always has like very esoteric Shrivijit knowledge, but I know a lot of it. But it actually reminds me that it's real. Like, it reminds me that that stuff is real. Like, I didn't just dream it. But I also think that I think that the idea is that the lower those, like especially like Hod and Netzach, it's going to be really important coming up. So, and Yesod, obviously Tiferet. There's this idea that well, we'll talk about it a little bit. So there's this idea, I can't remember if Matt discussed this last space or not, but there is an idea that Hod and not Netzach, excuse me, Hod and Geburah are in a competition. And Chris and I also just spoke about this quite extensively, obviously, for Avatar, because this is kind of, Aang is air and Zuko is fire, as Chris so eloquently said. So there is something, there's like two competing princes or two competing sort of energies or archetypes there. And I think that, well, Chris said something interesting where he posited that they were two halves of the same whole. So the way sort of they flow through the paths, which obviously I've said is slightly different, but their terminus ends up to be the same, path 22, if you want to express it as that, but you don't have to. But I think it's an interesting way to think of it. There are different ways that those two sparks travel through the tree. They're not necessarily different or distinct, but there's a distinction that can be made. So I don't know. Just something I've been thinking about is, like, obviously there's a lot of people that preference Geburah, preference Mars, preference the martial hosts, preference the fire. There's obviously a lot of people that preference the water, preference Hesed, preference Jupiter, worship Zeus. We know all this is true. But then you also have to consider that, yes, there are people who are maybe hermeticists who do really preference Mercury, really preference Hod, really preference the Prince of Air, the Ahriman, if you want to use Steiner, that kind of Ketu energy, right? There are people who worship that kind of, that current, right? Even Ganapati, we've talked about him many times, the elephant-headed god. Well, who is the deity or the astrological condition, not the deity, well, yes, deity, but astrological condition that he conquers? It's Ketu. Wouldn't that make sense? He's the imperfect prince. He is the aggregation of the paths and perhaps also of Malkuth itself, but he also remedies Ketu. So what did we discuss for Aeon of the Daughter? I'm sorry, guys, who've already heard this a million times, but she stands on Rahu, so you would need a prince to stand on Ketu. Rahu is what? The physical technology, the phone itself, the shell. It's also all the technology in the world, but in its physical form. And the software, that is really what is the Ketu, in my opinion. It's the smoky, subtle body of technology. So, what is that? Does the body and the spirit work together? Not really, not very often. It's like disunified, which is also very Aeon of the Daughter, very time of decoherence. It's a time of flux and smoke. So that's why I also think that, like, I met Solar and Joshua during doing the Daughter series more broadly, because it makes sense. You're going into a time of smokes. You're going into the cremation ground after destruction. But you're also able, as the Daughter is able to, resurrect the seeds with love, reconstitute them. I know Chris has already heard me say all of this before. Airbender, so I apologize, Chris. But it was a really interesting discussion, and I think it's very topical and relevant to right now, and also why the timeline is so shit. Yes, Matt, please go ahead.
Sorry, just a correction. The Aquarius path is not Netzach to Hod, it's Netzach to Yesod. So it's the moon, actually. So Tzadik and like hidden enemies, hidden
Yes.
forces,
Yes.
lunar stuff coming back again.
The path of the saint.
Yes.
One of my favorite things to discuss, Matt. So yes, the star card, falling star, because all things are rectified at Yesod. You know, regardless of how the Christian Kabbalists or the Christian mystics thought of it later, consciousness really is resolved at Yesod, because a lot of what we think of our thoughts is really not our thoughts, it's our feelings. Where do the vibes live? They live in Yesod. A lot of that's bullshit, a lot of that's preconception, a lot of that's not real. So sometimes the greatest illusion is our own feelings, our own aggregates. Well, that can be resolved at Yesod, or Yesodic consciousness. So yeah, that is a really important place. So even if you're Tiferatic in your goal or your view, we could say, or you want to go higher, like, so let's say you want to go higher, that's fine, that's good. I encourage that, go higher, but you still need a Yesodic consciousness. So you do need a little bit of that. There we go, Shakti. So our Japanese yogini queen. Welcome, Shakti, and thank you so much for coming. And so, yeah, you need the Yesodic consciousness as you're traveling, because that is the crystal millennium kingdom, right? As Sachki would say. And so this is something that I think has come up, is that, like, the truth sometimes is apparent, transparent maybe, and sometimes it is opaque. That's very lunar, because who is also at the moon? Rahu. Rahu swallows the moon, but he swallows it and makes an eclipse. Everybody loves that crescent moon headdress thing that the Egyptian gods wear. Very few people know that's really the eclipse. That has nothing to do with, I mean, yes, it of course has something to do with the moon, but it's not really the sun and the moon. Everything happens between the sun and the moon. So what is it really talking about? It's really talking about the secret eclipse, the secret sort of the hidden third thing, Daf. It's talking about the threshold to Daf. So it is there, but it is not always obvious, and it is not always apparent. And at Yesod, it is quite difficult to get to, but it's also where it could be considered to be the easiest point of entry as well, because you can just fall right through as a saint or a fool. Interesting idea, right? So yeah, so I think what Matt said was great, and I agree. So okay, so Donald Michael Craig. So he's going to talk about dream diary, and he says every magician should have a dream diary, and I agree in the sense that you should have a journal, you should have a diary of like, if you are okay. So when I used to be more into, what the magic I was doing, I would always write down any recipe, modification of it, modification of the rite, modification of the oration. I would always write it down first, usually after, but I'm gonna pretend to be more together than I was, and say I wrote it down first, simply because you do want a record of it. So I was actually good about this in the sense that if I did formulate a new oil or a new incense or a planetary blend, or I wanted to try out something new, which I often did, you want to have a record of it. And so this is also a great way to play with the grammar of things. Now, you don't have to be into herbal or incense making. Like I was very into planetary incense making and planetary oil and sporadic making. That's just me. That's just because that's something I liked. It was just like a doctrine of signatures. It's very Kabbalistic in a way, in a small way, in a microcosmic way. Makes you think really hard because a lot of that, the natures of the plants are actually invisible because you can't see their inherent martial nature necessarily. Yes, of course, there are categories that they have to fulfill in order to be placed in that episteme, but for them, you can't see the iron content. You can't see like the tin content. Those are all things that you have to rely on outside data. So, anyways, my point is that that was a very autistic but interesting way to start to understand the planetary natures. So, I agree, you must have a diary. If you want a separate dream diary, sure. I am not I do have vivid dreams occasionally, and I do occasionally, very rarely. Or I should say, I've had dreams in the past that have absolutely come true. But I'm not a prophetic dreamer. I'm not a vivid dreamer. Um, I used to have night terrors as a kid, so that, I don't know, other magicians have found that interesting. That I'm able to have extremely lifelike, realistic, physical dreams. But for the most part, in adulthood, I generally don't. So, um, which is fine because I'm very cerebral at the best of times. So I don't really need it in my sleeping time, or my sleeping hours, my dreaming life, right? But if you want one, keep one. And I agree. He says, please, please, please stay away from all those ridiculous meanings of the dreams book. Now, do I think this is a little harsh? Yes. But do I think that that is true? Also, yes. Why? Because I think to know magical symbols is to know them at their root. So I think that starting with the planets or the Sephira or whatever, if you're going to do tarot. That's fine. That's a root. Yes, Matt, please go ahead.
So I have a view on that, which is like, all these books for the masses. Like you have astrology books, you have the Kabbalistic angels based on the date. You have a bunch of stuff which is sold for many people so that everyone can do it. The same for oniric readings and whatever, right? Like they can work for you to start understanding, but if you are serious about it, you should start to figure out on your own. For example, if I, Matt, start dreaming about, I don't know, some specific kind of insect, sure, I can search online what the insect means and what people talked about it, but I should be the one at the end of the day that says, okay, for me, from my point of view, my consciousness, this insect means that. And I'm the only one that can do it because I'm the only one who has all the context, right? Like if you hold a dream diary, then that's super easy because you can just search for it. Like, oh, how many times did I actually dream about this? I had some time where I dreamt about like a specific game character, uh, and it's super funny. After it clicked to me afterwards that the game character is a fucking gypsy, which throws cards like magical cards at others, and then I was like, okay, I understand why I'm dreaming about being the character, or whatever. But then that's the thing, like I wouldn't find never a book that would talk about that specific symbol. But if you're being aware and you're like holding the diary and whatever, then you can make the readings for yourself. Like if you're doing the diary, you're basically getting a tarot reading for yourself every day, or multiple if you have multiple dreams. So definitely do it if you want to get serious. And then, like Jin was saying, start from the Kabbalah, the tarot, whatever, right? Just get a base and start from that.
Absolutely. Start from a strong base, a foundation, right? Just you want to start from a strong foundation because this is also a skill of discernment. So this will also serve you well higher up the tree, is that discerning the material for the masses. Now, I used to crack a lot of jokes, still do sometimes on the timeline at, at a variety of people, but Llewellyn sort of book learners, I I don't rescind that in any way because I think a lot of that material, like 98.9%, is total trash, total shit, not even really worth your time. But I do think that they sometimes will have someone that's like quite good, exceptional, high level, and they will be able to articulate things that are more subtle and worthwhile. So you have to have discernment. You have to build your foundation with something worthwhile. So I think that's great. I also think, although he's not necessarily, well, let me get back to the book and then maybe we'll come back to my ideas or not. What is magic? So this is obviously a perennial question if we are going to use that term. I'm not a perennialist, I'm an axialist, but we'll use that word. What is magic? Okay, everybody has their own sort of working definition. I think there's a very easy sort of way to explain this, but I'm going to go with what Donald says. In the first few pages, we have already covered a great deal of material. We discussed dreams, ritual work, gave you a ritual to do. I didn't read that. Told you to keep a record of your work. This was to get you started on practical work as opposed to theoretical knowledge. Now, sometimes people will call this derisively the armchair magician. Well, there is an aspect of the armchair magician depending on what material they're reading. Like if you're reading Pardes, you're you're having magical experience, or you're preparing to have magical experiences, because the way the subtlety of his of like how Ramek discusses like the colors, the flashing, the conceptual ideas, the letters, that's kind of leading you guide. That's like a guided meditation almost. Maybe you're not really doing the exercise in your head particularly, but even reading the material is like to some degree a penetration of that density. Okay. Also, listening to people. I'm not advocating for listening to me or anyone else in particular, but I have had sort of Sephirotic encounters, if you want to call them that, listening to podcasts, listening to other people discuss magical ideas and the Sephirot in particular. So I have experienced that. I know other people have, people that are more accomplished than me. And they are also able to tell. I actually had someone able to tell when I was having like I was podcasting. So it was an episode of mine, not on my show, on someone else's show. I was discussing something and I was having, we could say, a mild magical experience. Like I was in my mind, I was sort of penetrating the Sephira. It wasn't intentional. It was just because of what I was talking about. The nature of what I was talking about was really expanding out the layers of what that particular Sephira, which was interestingly Hode. Someone totally unrelated, didn't even know them when I recorded the episode, told me 2 years later, oh, Jin, like I could hear you having a magical experience during that. I almost started crying, honestly, not because I'm a teary person, but because the experience for me was so profound that someone else could hear that I was having that experience, made it be extra profound because it kind of made it real, right? Because they could kind of hear it, didn't know me at the time, and through the poor way that and I'm not saying I'm a poor articulator, but I don't think I'm like king of articulation per se, but I think I'm okay. And so I did my best, and I obviously clearly related something because he understood exactly what I was talking about because he said very specific things, specific words. I said it was very detailed. So why am I bringing this up? Like, what does this have anything to do with this? Did you just warn us away from unverified personal gnosis, Jin? Yes, I did. And yes, having another person confirm it is nice. But I was only able to do the episode because I actually had the knowledge with which to do it. Didn't just come from having the experience. So I just want to point that out first, but also say that yes, podcasting is definitely a way. It's absolutely magic. It's absolutely potential. Sound is, as Rom has, as I always reference Rom, I have said that since we restarted doing the spaces. It is the way to capture space. It's a way to capture the elements in space. I mean, that's it. So, and hopefully you're capturing the synthesis, and you're capturing that diamond thunder, and it's something pristine, and it's something that's a seed, and it's something that's people can build on and reference and grow in and of themselves. It's relative truth, but it's also maybe something deeper. But it's up to the person who's receiving it, right? So, yeah, thank you, Ron, for that. And okay, so what is magic? According to the famous occultist Aleister Crowley, magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. Is that true? Matt, do you agree with this? Solar, do you agree with this? Is this a good way to describe magic?
Yeah, it can be one way of doing it. Yeah.
I like it because it includes so many mundane things that I can just like kind of point to, like, chipping out, like, yeah, no, that's magic.
Absolutely. I think it goes with almost without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Is that the way you live your life is the great work, 100%. So the mundane actions absolutely mean the most. You could say, yes, the ritual actions also mean something, but you have to make room for the things if you want to manifest them. Matt and I have discussed this. Solar and I have discussed this. John and I have discussed this. Joshua and I have discussed this. Ram and I have discussed this. Shakti and I have discussed this. And I also want to shout out we have watercolor mirror in the room. So welcome. I recognize you from the timeline. It's our crazy gonzo, Gnostic magic and speculative space. So welcome. But yeah, you have to be able to have room for the things that you want and that you want to manifest. And this is something that Matt's really good about, and I've also discussed. But manifestation it's magnetization is better, in my opinion. This is also the Buddhist preference. Magnetization, drawing things in a more, I don't want to say nebulous because it's not quite nebulous because you're still fixated, you're single pointed in your will, right? But maybe you're more flexible on how the thing manifests. So magnetization can bring more things in. Now, as I've discussed, magnetization also has a negative quality. What is the negative quality? It also draws in negative attention or negative energies. But the point of doing the magnetization practice, if you are really focused on what I call, it's not me, but in Buddhist magic, what is red practices or magnetization practices, the idea is that you're not just doing magnetization, you are also building personal power. That's what the red is for, to build personal power. So even as you are drawing in, magnetizing the positive and negative polarities, you are able to overcome the negative polarities because you have built up enough personal power with which to overcome them. It's a very clever thing in Buddhist magic. Instead of having to practice 50 protector practices, you simply practice the deities of that family. And through their own, it's not exactly 100% the same. If you want to practice black deities or blue-black deities or any of the other ferocious deities, they will all have their way of interacting because part of them is us, right? Part of them is our consciousness, at least in a degree. How they manifest, interact, how we perceive them, how we understand them, how we pray to them, how we do, puja, sadhana, whatever it is, ritual, summoning, whatever it is. Part of them is our perception, right? To a degree, small, maybe large, depends on your point of view, your cosmology. But you just remember that everything has its poles, its plus and its ultra. Okay, so every color, if you were just thinking of the Buddhist magic strictly in a color magical theory, Every color will interact with reality slightly differently. It will draw both polarities to you, and it will also overcome the polarities in distinct ways. Not different, distinct. It's different. Okay, continuing. So, I think that's fine. Science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. Sure. It makes sense. Science and art, it's very temperance, it's very mixing things together, it's very alchemical. Yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, when we're talking about will, I would say it requires a little more than that. It's about consciousness, it's about perception, it's about as Chris talked about today, it's about the archetypes, the hero of a thousand faces. He referenced that book, not me, Jin, but Chris did. And so I think that's a lot of what it's about as well. And the transmutations that if you want to call it, I don't really like the word magician. I actually like the word mage a lot better. I know that's a little more RPG, but I feel like that actually fits me and maybe collectively us a bit better. It's like a little less boomer, right? Like a magician, it seems like a little dated. That's just my opinion. Obviously, I'm like, I'm very weeby, so mage, that's just a lot cooler to me. But yeah, I think I think the transmutations that a mage is meant to undergo is not you're not always fully conscious of it every time that you're doing it, and that's part of the process as well. And that's kind of sort of what I think people who are just new to magic get daunted by. They think that you have to be super advanced, you have to plan everything out, and you have to know exactly what you're doing. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have that to a degree, but I think it's actually more interesting if you approach it in a dancing way. And you say, you're right, I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but I'm going to take a couple of these conceptual ideas, I'm going to meditate on it, I'm going to think about it, and I'm going to try and apply them. That's to me what magic is. And then it's also not just the manifestation into spiritual or material reality, it's also the way your consciousness changes. Now, he does talk about this by citing Dion Fortune and saying that she was a lay psychologist, and that's totally fine. I'm not huge, as you all know from the Lodge and from the spaces, if you've listened to them, I'm not a huge psychology person. I think that that's a sort of klipa that contains an aspect of the science and art of the mind that it's not in its fullness. I think it has some serious flaws. I think we've learned that. I think that there's an overly materialistic way it can be interpreted. I'm not saying it's like negative and we should just totally discard it. No, I mean we did read the Red Book, so obviously we are, at least I've been interested in the way that psychoanalysis, specifically Jungian psychoanalysis, specifically Jung as a Red Book shaman or a Red Book magician, how he articulates reality. So, because obviously there is a metaphysics to it, and he's drawing from metaphysics and he's using psychoanalysis to explain it. So, there's obviously something for us as a group to draw from. But I also think that it's a flawed model, and I just think that there are some archetypes that are more interesting and that actually maybe speak more to the. I don't think he would even dismiss that. I think he would actually agree that there are like primordial symbols that maybe are more potent than the language itself, than the language of psychoanalysis. Yes, Solar, please go ahead and please disagree with me if you want.
No, I don't disagree at all. I mean, we've been over this a million times, and it's pretty fundamental, so I won't like belabor the point here. But I think at a certain point, what we would call like psychology, like the sort of like Western contemporary thing that emerged in the late 19th century, early 20th century, I don't know that is compatible with any kind of view of I or self that involves trying to release identification with the mind, right? And so I think that that's going to be a pretty like insurmountable barrier, right? Like it's going to lock you thinking in terms of like thinking psychologically is going to lock you into a view of yourself that is very, very expansive, right? And it's the one that we're kind of like naturally in the West, like at home in, but that might emerge later. especially as you work up the tree, as more of a limitation. So I personally don't see, unless you're already really inclined to work within that vocabulary and way of understanding the world, I don't know why you would like go out of your way to dip into that, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. See, Matt's 100%. Yeah, very well said. I don't really have anything to add to that. I think it is about consciousness. I think that if you're really interested in what consciousness is, as I've been quoted saying, read a fucking Purana, read a fucking sutra. I don't know, read a Buddhist commentary. Like that's really the science of the mind, in my opinion. Even Kabbalah touches, a lot of the sages touch on this science of consciousness, what that is. There's no excuse, exactly what Solar said. There's no reason to limit yourself by the language. Go further than that, and the historical texts actually explore it in a lot more depth. And so that is probably something that I would have said if I was writing this book in like 2025. Not that I want to write a magical book, I don't, but I would have said that is that I probably would read something a little more historical in the sense of to gather where I want to go and how I want to think about it. That's just me. You do what you will. But okay, so magical works. So he admits that the definition is rather broad, basically. Every intentional act is a magical act. I agree with this. I think Solar agrees with this. I think Matt agrees with this. The implications that the physical implications are the lived implications of what we do, or our lived actions have metaphysical implications. Okay, I think that's like it's a self-evident truth. It means what it means. I also think that he said he will not teach black magic. So I differ with him on this. Not because I'm into black magic. I'm not really into black magic. I'm a gray mage. But I personally think, this is just a personal view, this is not solely held by me. I believe that most magic, like intentional, gross ritual acts of magic, are black magic. Now, I'm not saying they're negative or bad. I'm saying that they have a more severe cosmological or karmic implication. So you have to be that much more careful about doing those things. That doesn't mean don't do them. Okay, Matt, yes, please go ahead.
It's funny. I was listening to a podcast earlier today of a Brazilian guy that lives in China and like is basically initiated into a lot of the Chinese like stuff, basically Asian in general. And he was talking about this difference that in Brazil, for example, when you talk about black magic, people usually associate it with, let's say, something that you do to harm someone else, right? Let's say you do for lack of a better word, like a voodoo or whatever to someone else. But he was saying, and then maybe people that are from Asia can correct me, that in Asia is more like, or at least the one he was studying about, is more like something that is, I think I could translate it as like occult. Like you wouldn't do it in, let's say, a public space, right? It's not necessarily something that you are doing to harm someone, but it's just something that you're not doing for everyone to see, right? It's more grotesque, more weird, let's say. And because at the end of the day, for example, if you learn how to do some candle magic, it's really gray at the end of the day. You can do it to make things better, let's say, let's call it like this, or to cause harm, but you are the one with the intention doing the stuff. The magic is the same, right? The magic itself doesn't have any, not black or white. Like if I have a gun, it's not black or white. If I use it to kill someone, then you could say I'm using like a black gun or whatever. And if I'm just doing it for the practice, not showing anybody, then it's white gun. Like doesn't make any sense, right? It's your intention behind this thing. If you put it in those terms of good and bad, which I think it's like very Western.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm a little different where I totally understand because I remember taking this fourth year seminar class on the Japanese prehistory. And so we had to read Foucault and the sort of like the public, the course emphasized like the public and the private. And I remember this very specifically because you're saying that he lives in China. He's talking about the public and the private. This was like a big deal in like pre-modern Japan and China. It was like this idea of the public and the private. So I could understand that there's a strong delineation between the two. But I would also say that Dharma actually makes this argument as well. So Buddhism would see these kind of gross things as dangerous, as risky, as maybe black magic, but it is like up to you, like you were saying, like it's your interaction with the ritual technologies or the physical technologies, like you use the example of a gun. That's a great example. It's your interaction with that technology, that Rahu technology, that either it produces sin or produces something else, produces change in the world. Because what is that firing of a gun? It's the perfect Gevuritic example. Because Gevura is what? It's nothing if not the flintlock, right? It's what creates the spark. It's the flint that's hitting against the stone and creating the spark, okay? So that's absolutely, there we have Phoebes. So welcome, Phoebes. I had I can't even think. Anyways, I had Indonesian food and I thought of you. So welcome, Phoebes, and Phoebes is part of our Grey Lodge, and so basically that's what it is. It's I think it's black magic because I think there's an implication that when you're doing gross magic, like for material, I'm not saying materiality is bad. I've never said this. I never will say that. I think that you could say that I have a little prosperity gospel element in me, like where I think like yeah, use the things to be successful. Use it to be uh, wealthy. Use it to be like live in your fullness. Like do with this life, like live it as if you know. Yes, Solar, please go ahead. Save me from myself.
No, you're good. I just wanted to point out what I've observed as an inconsistency that a lot of people have, and this is self-crit, right? We're having a Maoist moment. I also used to kind of think in this inconsistent way, um, where I would get incredibly serious about it, scrupulous, right? Like analyzing the potential karmic implications of this or that, like very, very like kind of minor and banal, like magical or ritual act, right? That I was considering undertaking, in a way that was completely out of proportion. Compared to the amount of scrutiny that I was giving my day-to-day actions that I considered, non-magical actions, going to work, getting a Whopper from the burger place. I don't actually eat at fast food, so I don't know. Sorry, a Big Mac or whatever you do there, right? And the idea is that like your quote unquote non-magical actions in the world all have very very deep, almost infinitely unfathomable karmic implications as well, right? And so like am I saying you shouldn't worry about anything with respect to your magical stuff? No, but I'm saying that like you should approach these things with the same level of seriousness, with the same like level of like severity, right? And really, if you're not used to thinking of most activities in your normal life as having any sort of karmic or cosmic or whatever significance or implications, really, you're sort of telling on yourself, right? Because all you're doing is saying, wow, I've gotten really good at numbing myself um, to these possibilities, at being indifferent to them, to not noticing them, to anesthetizing myself so that I can move through the world unthinkingly. Like congratulations, I guess, right? But that's a really like deprived way to move through the world, I would think, among other things, right? So just like again, it's part of this like I don't like partitioning off magical stuff, magical thinking from sort of like the rest of our lives and how we interact with the world. And I think this is one of the instances where you can get really tripped up if you're not like kind of serious about it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's a great note. Don't get too, as I joke, too autistic about the karmic implications. Just recognize that they may happen and try and avoid them where you can. This also applies, like Solar said, it does apply to your daily life. And that is part of what Rigpa is. It's kind of like the pristine awareness that you are aware of the karmic implications. But don't get lost in them either. So, I'm an imperfect vehicle for this message. So just remember that. And don't follow my example, but sometimes I think I bring a little insight into this, a little bit at least. Yeah, basically that. I think that was really well said. I think of magic as gray, like Matt said. Like it's neutral. It's a totally neutral force. It's our interaction with it. That's very dangerous, though. I want to just say that it can be rather dangerous. Like magic is no joke. Sorcery is no joke. Magic, like the ritual magic or ceremonial magic, that's no joke. It's like not. It, there's a reason why people have shied away from the public discussion or display, to bring something Matt said up. Like there is a reason why people shy away from that, but there's also the reality is that they're doing it also right in front of us at all times, and in every form of media, in every facet of life. So yes, Matt, please go ahead.
Yeah, just like you were saying, it's right in front of us. So yesterday I was in a concert, and there were four bands playing, and all of them you could see from like the merch. All of them literally had fucking like occult symbology like all over the place. And obviously, if you pay attention to the lyrics and the whole concert, right? The concert is a magical ceremony. You have sound, you have light, you have performance, you have a bunch of things. You have people, the guys making you do gestures, right? Like so it's a metal concert. People are gonna do horns, people are gonna do shouting and so on. So it's a whole magical operation going on. And you could see like literally some of them were even literal. You had one of the bands like Darth. Come on. What the fuck? You cannot say like, oh no, it's not. No, it's literal occult things. But then you go to enterprises, businesses, and they also do it. They just do it more subtly. Like you see X, the logo, and you think nothing of it, but it's full of symbology. You see like Google's logo, or even like there's a thing near where I lived in Italy that was literally called Tau Tus. Like Tau is in the last letter, the Hebrew letter. And when I realized that, I was like, what the fuck, bro? Like, it could be that they are not necessarily even aware of it, but it's there. And it produces let's say, the outcome that having that name does. So again, it's all over us. Or even if you're in traffic and then you think ill of someone because they cut you off and you think, oh, you wish ill of that person, you are doing magic. And if you don't control yourself, it can be as strong as if someone is doing like a proper, let's say, magical operation to fuck someone else. So that's why, again, like I think worst case scenario, just treat your consciousness, how you can, however you can. If it's by learning, if it's by doing stuff, just treat it somehow.
100%. Again, agree. So great, Matt. Thank you. Your mind is your vehicle, right? Like your mind is your Hecalot. It's also your Merkaba. It's all in there. Yeah, that is how you direct the forces of the world. So exactly what Matt said. That's really what I'm talking about when I'm saying karmic implication. Like, how much control do you have of your mind? How much control do you have if you are angry with someone or you don't like someone? Yeah, I'm bringing Joshua up, but if you do that, you have to also, you can't just imagine them in your sadhana getting smushed in the face. Like you just can't do that. You have to control yourself. Yes, things happen. Yes, sometimes wrathful deities do allow you to do those things, but you're not really doing it for that. That's part of why you have bodhicitta, and you make that foundational view. Oh yes, Joshua, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. So I couldn't help but think of the evil eye and also the protectorate, which is like that blue eye. Could you guys maybe talk about that or how it's analogous to other cultures?
Matt, why don't you discuss the Hamsa and Solar if you want to? You're welcome to also do it, and I will do it after. Like I'll add my part. I'll let Matt go first, then Solar, then me. How's that sound?
Okay, let's go. So the way I understand it, you have in Italy, for example, you have stregheria, and one of the magics, let's say, that you have, it's literally you get you're both like your index finger and your thumb, and you open your eyes, like looking. It's literally like in Portuguese, we also have it in Brazil, we call it olho gordo, which is like fat eye, right? So evil eye, fat eye, you basically, you're putting this kind of like, you're basically interfering with the process of the other person. And that's why one of the qualities of Netza, for example, if you're doing the lightning path, so you're trying to manifest something from the spiritual to the digital, from the spiritual to the physical, you shouldn't necessarily talk about things. Like if you're trying to do something, don't go boasting about it to everyone, because if you do, even if the person is not consciously bringing like bad thoughts to you, let's say you talked about it to your mom or whatever, if they have some limiting thoughts themselves, they can project that into you. So now they're sending kind of this radio signal backwards, right? So I think in practical terms, you can bring it out to that. Basically, it's if you can see it in physics, it would be like waves of, like radio waves. You're trying to send yours, and the other person is trying to send theirs, and if theirs is stronger, then you're fucked. Then you're listening to them and not sending your own. So it's like a will force, let's say.
Yes, I totally agree with this. 100% agree. This is why the will is so important, and to like know what that is. It's not that the will is, people I believe overemphasize what the will is, but it's super important. It's like inextricably, fundamentally, it's super important, okay? So the reality is to understand what that even is, what that looks like, what that means, what it is you want outside of aggregation. So exactly what Matt said, like the interfering rays, you could say, the interfering waves are the aggregates. It's what blocks your will. It's what blocks your spell, if you want to call it that. I don't really use that language, but yes, it blocks it from manifestation. And so there is something in power shared is power lost. This is also why we don't always share secret things. This is why I don't like talk about everything. I'll talk about a lot, but there are certain things that I'm not comfortable discussing, and that's very normal. That doesn't mean I'm not trying to like gatekeep or anything. I'm just, some people are okay to speak to one-on-one about those things, but it's very difficult because you can get too lost in the words. So it has to be, everything in their right place. And yes, sorry, Joshua, I'm gonna let Joshua go because I know he's been waiting patiently for me to stop talking, so I'll stop talking.
It's cool, dude. And a lot of times when I'm listening, it's adding to what I would say anyway, so it's quite all right. Don't worry about it. But so I couldn't help but imagine when Matt was talking, I was thinking, oh, the tower card in tarot a lot of times will have an eye above the tower, or sometimes a thunderbolt. And so it made me think like, oh, when you cast the stink eye or whatever, when you're looking at that person and you're giving them that glare, it's like a judgment type thing too. So I was like, well, where is that on the tree? So where's the tower on the Sephiroth? Is it on one of the paths?
So I'll just say that there's an element of smiting there. That's something that we have talked about in the chat, probably the last couple days. And sorry, Matt, please go. Please answer. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No worries. Yes. So literally, if you take one of the letters that can be assigned to the tower is the Aim. So the Aim is also understood as the eye, right? And at least in Papu's terms, it's connected to, let me remember, it's hard to, no, wait. It's Tiferet to Hod, I'm pretty sure. I think Tiferet to Hod, the path. But anyways, so you have this idea, like you're saying, the eyes, right? And you made me remember something, which is, I don't know if it's like a membrane or whatever that you have in the eyes, that it literally launches some lasers or whatever, like some lightnings, or I don't know, like the biological term, whatever it is, but you can search for it for you to be able to see. So there is literally some lightning bolts, like when you gaze into someone. That's why, let's say you are in a concert and you start looking at someone, staring at them, they can be far away and they will look back to you, whereas they could look into anyone, but they look back to you specifically. It's like you're gazing at them, you're sending the signal, right? Also, another thing, when Jin was talking, I remembered about the sharing, like when you share, you lose power. So something very interesting that like happens, if you think about it, even in business, right? Like markets saturate. So everyone is doing fucking e-com, then e-com stops just being easy money. Now, like there is money in e-com, but it's much harder. Like only the big dogs have most of it. So in the same terms, if you have like an entity or whatever that you want to get power from, and everybody knows it, it's going to be more saturated because it's like sharing its energy for a lot of people. But if you know some ancient, like Mongol, I mean Mongol because let's say it's a culture nobody knows, and then it's like some random entity that does this very specific thing, and you find it, and then like you start to use it. Most people won't use it, so it's definitely going to be more powerful than if you got like some random saint that everybody knows. And then if you were smart about it, you wouldn't share that as well with everybody, because again, then with time it would lose its power. Or even like I don't know if in English they had something similar, but like in Portuguese, at least in Brazil, people started to use the word like gratitude a lot, as in like instead of using thank you or whatever, they started to do this gratitude thing, and it started getting assigned. Like when people say something like this, they assign it to like some new agey kind of style of person. So then again, the word itself lost its power. It's like mimetic power. So you don't use the word anymore if you don't want to be treated as this new age, let's say, kind of people. So it's a very, very interesting thing. I remember when Jim was talking.
No, that was great. Thank you, Matt, for sharing. I just want to shout out Vinny from the Ghoulcast. Vinny is a homie from way back. He will be on my show eventually. It was always intended to be. I just want to say thank you, Vinny, for coming. He's a great dude, and he knows a lot about magic, actually, a lot. And I'm sure he has some interesting ideas. Vinny, if you want to come up to discuss, you're more than welcome to. Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to come in here with more of a question for the other guys and for you than anything like definite on the Hamza. But I don't know. So I was sort of looking back through some of my older materials from previous experiments in messing around, shall we say, right? And so I was looking at a page that was essentially a sigil of Tiamat that had been, ordained with blood in a somewhat aesthetic manner, right? And it struck me when I was looking at that, and then I was just looking at different pictures of Hamzas, right? There's this very, very clear resemblance, right, between the way the eye in the middle of the hand is generally stylized, right, and this kind of vulvic, Georgia O'Keeffe type of image, right? It's very vaginal. And I was wondering if you guys, because for me now, like I'm sort of like locked into seeing that, and I have a sort of particular way of understanding that in terms of like void dragon consciousness and seeing this sort of I don't know, this relationship between the eye as also like in being involved in the sort of creative generative aspect of reality, right? That the eye is not just this sort of passive receptor of an objective world out there, but because of how I sort of understand the world, right? It actually kind of goes both ways, right? Because all of sort of material reality, samsara, is actually this, sort of like projection. Anyway, so I was wondering though if any of you guys happen to know if in the history of the symbology as the Hamza like developed around the Mediterranean basin, if it was ever understood that there was kind of this vulvic undertone to it, or if that was either explicitly or kind of implicitly, or is this just like me recognizing the fact that these shapes kind of look similar?
Well, I see Joshua. I'm gonna maybe I should let Joshua go. I'll let Joshua go. Please, Joshua, go.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I can now, as far as the open hand, I can't support that being vulvic. Now, when you say vulvic, I'm assuming you mean like vaginal or yonic, right? But
Yeah, and
however,
I mean the eye specifically, like the kind of ecliptic, like elliptic shape of that is sort of stylized, just turned, rotated 90 degrees from how you would stylize, like vaginal orifice, etc.
like a Vesica Pisces rather than, right?
Sure, yeah, and if you look at how a lot of the contemporary left-hand path folks will stylize like Tiamat or some other kind of mother draconic thing, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, as far as hand gestures, what I do know is that in the Mesopotamian region, they had the fig symbol, which is when you take your thumb and stick it through your index finger and middle finger, and it would protrude out the other end. And you'll sometimes see them making this gesture at one another. And so I was wondering, is like, well, the middle finger today is a phallic symbol, means, we know what that means. And so it was like meaning the same thing, but from the opposite gender. So I didn't know if, and sometimes it was seen as like an insult. So anyway, I think it's been preserved in that area. So that's one thing that kind of comes to mind in terms of that. But as far as the Vesca Pisces is concerned, I think it relates a little bit to the glyph for Pisces. Excuse me, there's rednecks with big trucks in the background.
Okay, so that was great. Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, Solar. So it went a little differently than I thought. It was very interesting though, and but I think I'll bring a little more maybe practical magical history to it. Is that I don't even know if this is interesting for anyone, but I know in some of the Islamic theory or the Islamic lore behind the Hamsa, maybe not the Middle Eastern Islamic, but the Indonesian, which is obviously what I'm the most familiar with, is it is also called the Hand of Miriam. I know this is also a Jewish name. For the same thing. But yeah, it can be, or the Hand of Aisha, excuse me, sorry about that. But it also is the Hand of Miriam. So it's both of those things. And it, I would say, yes, Solar. I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about, like that sigil of Tiamat. It's very, yeah, there's a similarity. Now, did they take it and borrow some of like some common symbols? Probably. Like, did they see that and maybe recognize it in their own way, in their own system? Sure. Okay. So I do think that it relates a lot to the dragon, just as the number 17 relates a lot to that kind of like void dragon, that kind of like the woman and the beast, like the woman and the dragon, like riding that energy. That's what it is. But she's taming it, right? I think that's sort of the thing, and even her, if you want to look at it in a tantric angle, and there is a lot of interaction along that sort of like Arab trade route with Buddhism, with Hinduism. Of course, the subcontinent is a place of synthesis. It always has been. So I think that you look at it and it's the gesture of boon giving, but it's also the gesture of obstacle removing of the left hand. So it's both things at the same time. So it's a really powerful, potent gesture. And so I agree with you 100% that it relates more to that very powerful polarity or current that you're talking about that maybe is more of a deeper layer. Yes, you can describe it in the left-hand path sort of framework, but I also think you can describe it in like the normative Jewish or Islamic or um, there's also Christians who believe in that symbol. So I think you can describe it in the normative ways as well as the esoteric ways and in the left hand pathway. So it's one of those things that clearly has deeper symbolic and metaphysical resonance, not just for those people, but for the people that have encountered it, probably because it does speak to a primordial symbol. I'm just not sure what that is per se, but I think that we've all come up with interesting ideas and ways to think about it. And I'm gonna let Joshua go ahead. Joshua, please go ahead.
Thank you. I thought of something that was a little more relevant when I should have mentioned earlier. So the lower nature is a lot of times depicted as like snake legs or fish legs or something like that, mermaid looking bottom or whatever. So in a sense, that's kind of represented also of the like the Tiamat in the chthonic realm or the abyss, right? So but then it goes back to the head again. And so that's, I think, why we have like this the birth and child element coming from Pisces or that Vesica Pisces is it's inherently connected to the fact, that it just repeats, right? And so from feet to head, well, there's that gap in the middle. And so the Vajra too comes to mind, or the torque, because when it's wielded, the hand is where those two opposites meet and are conjoined. And so I think there's a subtle hint to that there that I wasn't thinking of before this conversation, but that's where you will find the two opposites joined, and therefore there's that channel or flow. And so I was thinking of the stories that are associated with, like, Tiamat, for instance. Marduk gets the winds. Well, that could be the winds of spring, or and the lightning bolts and stuff that he's using from the storms. So it's almost as if the story of that has kind of repeated too. And so when I think of hand now, I also think of, well, what does the hand wield? It's also the ace card, or ace tarot in many cases. And so in some cases, the hand of God, as it were, may have a blessing or a divine weapon or whatever, an astra, I think it's called in the Hindu. And there was one other thing that came to mind, was that when Buddha is seated and putting his hand to the earth, it kind of has that same attitude, I think, where you're like mastering the material realm or the kingdom or whatever it might be that, you know, he's touching, I guess, or grounding himself, right? So again, that lightning bolt kind of thing comes to mind, but now he's grounded maybe as well. So anyway, I don't know, just rambling. Thank you.
I actually think he brought up some really interesting things. I'm going to let Solar go, and maybe I will revisit some of the things that Joshua said. So, Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, like, don't mind me. I think maybe what's happening on my end is that I'm having this sort of like basic bitch, like kindergarten realization that the eye just basically symbolizes view, and one's view is actually what gives birth to the world, right? And how it appears like to us as, you know, consciousness. Again, and I'm just like seeing these motifs repeat over and over again, you know, as I'm sort of like processing and internalizing these very, very basic fundamental things. So yeah, don't mind me. Don't let me fucking derail this whole thing.
You never derail anything. I obviously greatly appreciate all three of you for co-hosting and for all the support you've given me. And so everything that you have to say, I think is worthwhile, and I want to listen. So, but I will say, Solar, that's not a basic bitch. That's like that's the primordial view. That's Buddhism right there. What you just described. It's like that's what it is. It's green Tara. She's standing on the ocean. She's the storm cloud. She's the eye of the storm. You want to bring in the Hamsa? She obviously has she not obviously. She also has a form green Tara where her eyes are in the palms of her hand. So maybe that is similar. I'm not sure. But something interesting about that. But yeah, she's standing there. Her third eye is open. So she's at Hesed. She's standing there. What is she looking at? What could she possibly be looking at? Well, she's looking at Binah. She's looking at death. She's looking at her consort. But they're not together. She has undergone the processes of the carnal ground. She has become a Dakini. She has raised herself into a sky witch. Remember, she didn't start as that. That's the interesting thing about Tantra. She didn't start from that point. She started as Uma Pavarti, and she becomes Uma Tara. She becomes the queen of heaven, the star that is the queen of heaven. But when she is as Green Tara, she's on the Maha Smashana. So she looks at her consort, who is both time and its destruction, who is both death and its understanding. She looks at him exactly like what Matt said. Like when you're at a concert, it's exactly the same thing. All around her is thunder. That is what appears there is Vajra. That is what right. We've talked about this so many times, and to bring it to something Chris and I didn't discuss, but I wanted to because I was trying to wait until we do Book of Fire. But the aggressive force of Hesed is what? It's Vajra. It's lightning. So it's smiting force. It's like when you hold the Buddhist Vajra. I'm talking about the Buddhist Vajra, not the Hindu Vajra or the Iranian Vajra, but the Buddhist Vajra. It is a figure 8. It's closed. The prongs are closed. 5 prongs closed. Yes, there are other versions that have 9 prongs. We won't get into that. And there's another version with 3 prongs. But for our discussion, 5 prongs, the 5 elements, closed. Sound is in the center. Sound is that expansive, explosive, and self-combusting force. It always comes back to green Tara. Why? Because she is the 2. She is the 2 is the lowest prime number. So it's the first thing. Even if you want to say she is the 2, so there's something else that comes first, fine. It's where perception happens. It's where the hearing happens. It's where the sight happens. It's where the world becomes a place as solar. Exactly how I think of it. When she views the world, she is the world because she understands what she's viewing. So she's indistinct from it, but she's also in perception, consciousness, and will. It's part of the reason that she's green. So I thought that was very profound. That's why I emphasize the green Tara, sort of that Hasidic motif, I guess, because I think that's, if you just understand that, that's why Ramak has said, because if you just understand that, you understand a lot of fucking reality. You understand a lot of magic. Doesn't make it easy. But Hesed is kind of like infinite in its expansiveness, so it also contains a lot of potential. So for people who are more normie, that makes sense why they're drawn to green Tara worship. That makes sense why they are drawn to that Sephira. Okay, sorry, Joshua. Please go ahead.
Dude, that was so epic. And again, it ties into what I was going to bring up. So when you were talking about the first couple of elements there before we can perceive reality, well, I was talking about the numbers, I think, before, and how the number 1 is actually 3 vectors. So basically it's a triangle. So you have to have 1, 2, 3 vectors before you can have the first angle. And then 2 has 2 angles, 3 has 3 angles, so on and so forth. But before you can even form the 1, the numeral 1, you have to have the monad and dyad, which are not numbers at all. And so it kind of blew my mind. So I see that as like the handle of the sword, and then the numbers start the lightning bolt or the sword blade, so to speak. So just kind of blew my mind, dude. Anyway, that wasn't even what I was going to talk about. That was just what I thought of as you were talking. What I was going to actually ask was Solar or Matt about the relationship between Yod, which is hand, and Ayin, which is eye. And if there was any possible connection there. But also in Freemasonry, the 32nd degree is depicted by a triangle with a Yod in the middle. And of course, we see the triangle with the eye in it a lot of times. So I've always pondered about the connection there between the eye and the hand of God, the eye of God and the hand of God, etc. So he uses his eye to inspect and judge, right? And it's got this squinting kind of gesture. Think of like when they're counting the hairs of the red heifer, so to speak, or something like that. And where you're searching the lamb, the Passover lamb, you're spending 3 days going over it with, fine tooth comb, so to speak. Except in this attitude of squinting, right, and inspecting it for blemishes and things like that, and also inspecting work. So it's got this like supervisory aspect to it. Or something like that. And there's a Greek myth about the Cyclops that kind of relates to this too, because of he in the story he bent over the doorway of the cave and was like feeling the sheep because they had put his eye out, because he would normally inspect the sheep and count them as they went through, right? So I find that story kind of a weird oblique parallel to this. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'll go really quickly.
Yeah, sorry, Matt. Please go ahead.
No, all good. So the one thing I can see definitely that links Ayin and Yud, like you asked, is both of them are in some way connected to Tiferet, at least from the Pappus connections. So Ayin would be Tiferet to Hod, so you are like bringing light to your reasonings, and Yud, you are connecting Hesed to Tiferet, so you're expanding your balance, right? And another one, since you talked about the masonry symbol, another one that I remembered is the G. So Gimel, you can see the symbol, it's a hand as well, that is like grabbing something, right? So the G, the great architect and so on. So that's very interesting. And again, it's connected to Tiferet. So it's Keter to Tiferet. It's like the first, it's like the visible form of the invisible God, right? The Christ, whatever. So that's very interesting connections I think you can make there. Let me think someone else. And
Okay,
I think
oh,
yeah,
sorry,
those
Matt.
are no, just to finish, I think those are very interesting. But as far as, let's say, tarot goes, I don't see much then, because on Yud would be the wheel and Ain would be the tower, right? So not necessarily super connected, like all the cards connect themselves, but nothing that came to mind aside from that.
Solar, do you want to give it a go or no? Yes. I mean,
No,
I
I don't
should
really have
say
anything to
no.
add.
Okay. Well, thank you, brother. Okay, so Joshua, I have now completely forgotten my point.
Sorry.
No, it's definitely not your fault. It's definitely no one's fault. It happens. I'm not even smoking during this space. I'm trying to be a little more coherent for you guys and for myself back in recording. And but I did forget, so I apologize. I'll think of it. I'm sure it'll come up. That's often how it works, right? So thank you, Matt, for like answering that. I think one thing I did think was interesting about the Hamsa and the kind of triangle thing that you brought up, William, or Joshua, Dr. Birkin, is that the Kali Yantra. The Kali Yantra is a single downward facing triangle, right? So that is kind of interesting if you're thinking about it, because she is the number one in the Todala Tantra, right? The Kali, the destruction of time. But it's not the prime cause, it's the prime mover. So we've talked about this a million times. I won't bore you guys again. And if you're interested in that concept, there's an Anne of the Daughter's Face that I don't remember which one it was, but one of them we extensively discussed this, and even the example with Tara. So you can go listen to that. But for Joshua, I do think that, yeah, I think that the numerology plays a large part in understanding not just the cosmological map, but also where you're ending up. I think I know this sounds self-evident if you know anything about Kabbalah, but I think it's a little underestimated. I think people tend to look at it like, oh, this Sephir is a terminus, this Sephir is a terminus. Well, as Matt and I have often said, you want the light to travel through the paths. You're not trying to constrict it. So nowhere should really be the terminus but that. But if there is an actual terminus, then that's okay. It's Kether or Malkuth. But don't get too lost in them. And so, I do think it's really important, and I think it's a interesting sort of dialectical logic game that you can play out and sort of see like how things move, how things shift, how the wheel turns. I think you can figure all of this out through the numbers, figuring out what's prime, the numbering system. I think it will also shout out because Rom's in the room. Uh, in Shrivijaya Tantra, so not in Kali Kola, but in Shrivijaya Tantra, Tripura Sundari is the prime, and she is 3. So she is the expression of Hud, or the word, or Mercury, or well, she stands on Rahu, but as I said, there's an element of her taming Ketu as well, although she doesn't really do that. But for our purposes, we'll say that there's a movement there. There's at least a relationship between Mercury and Rahu. So that's kind of what the forces that she tames. So she as third cause, or you could say the word is the third cause, logos as the third cause, but it's really the prime cause. So it takes, as you said, it takes the 1 to make the 3. Well, who is the 3? And in Shrivijaya, she actually overtakes Kali. So she overtakes Kali in prime importance. She is far above her. It correlates much more to the idea of the 4 Kabbalistic worlds, more Tantra. There are multiple worlds. Like, it's no problem. There's no discrepancy at all. Like, yes, maybe they categorize them differently. Maybe they call them different names. Maybe they have a few more, a few less. But usually the 4th world is the formless worlds. So you're going into a place that's completely ineffable, completely conceptual. So it can be rather challenging to say that a deity exists there, right? But in the case of Tripura Sundari, she is also who, as we've made the case for Sophia, at least in one way of thinking, right? Because she is the primordial wisdom. She is the wisdom. She is the goddess of wisdom. That's what she is. So, and she is the well that I know that Joshua is so fond of. It's the 64 triangles, the 4 up, 5 down, and that is in each triangle is the word. So it is the well, it's the splendor, it's the seeds of splendor, it's the spark of splendor, it's where that lightning is. So if you hang upside the tree, you're looking at that beautiful yoni. I'm just using that word, but it's not necessarily her yoni. Of course, it can be, but really, it's just her creation. It's the world. It's her emanation. So unlike Kali, she is not fully active in the world, which is what the Dakinis are. So this is what relates the Dakinis with the Sri Vijaya Tantra, because the Dakinis are the full expression of the word in the world. And this is also an idea in Buddhism, is that the words, the bijas, but not just the bijas, certain kinds of texts like the Pranaparamita Sutras, like the Tantras, like all Tantras, those words, the actual physical book, can also be a Buddha. It's a very interesting concept. It's very, I would say, interrelated to other ideas of letter mysticism and why the text is so important and why the word is so important. So, anyways, I'm sorry to go on about Tripura Sundari. I just felt like that was an interesting kind of way to look for it. And if you want to think of it, she is the red Tara, so the papaya colored Tara of Hod. And so there is obviously a relationship there where Hod is the what? The heart of Hesed. The spark of Hod is the heart of Hesed. So who's the? So you could say that kind of expression of heatless fire of her function is magnetization, is love, really. So that obviously makes sense, right? Like, what is green Tara if not mercy in the world, if not loving kindness? Maybe not the fullness of it, but in Shrivija she is. So again, that relates, like, Hod is just there. It's a very important sphere for them. So and it depends. It's just like for Kali Kola, if Kali is your primary deity, Binah is going to be your primary Sephra. It just is how it goes. Okay, Matt, please go ahead. Sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Oh, my bad, I was muted. So it was very good what you said. I remembered something when you talked about like working on the numerology, about Joshua's question about the Yud and the tower, how they connect. So one very interesting numerology practice you can do when you decompose one arcana, let's take the tower, for example. So the tower can be the 16th arcana. So you can decompose how it would be built by different numbers. So the synthesis, let's say, of the 15, the devil, and the mage. That's one thing. Then you have the 14 and the 2. So temperance and the high priestess. And you go on and go on. So if you want to do that and you want to connect Yud to the tower, you would have to sum up 10. So Yud plus 6, which is the lovers. And then you have the duality of the lovers perceived in a great wheel of cycles, so the 10. And then you start to connect. Okay, that's how the Yud can connect with the tower. And another interesting thing that you mentioned as well, Joshua, about the Cyclops. I don't remember exactly why you mentioned them when you were talking about it, but I saw in my notes on the tower that there was a mention about the Cyclops as well. So basically, this idea that, like, you have I don't want to get too esoteric here, but let's say you can look at it at the psychological way. Let's put it this way, where you're basically, you have this laser focused view. So you have the Cyclops from the X-Men, right? As we were talking earlier, like your eyes literally, they trigger up some lightning bolts that go out. I don't know how to explain in biological terms, but they actually launch some lightning bolts when you're looking at something. And when you're like focusing onto it, then again you have the Cyclops from the X-Men, right? You have that whole power going out, which if taken in a wrong way can become the tower. So you can become the one smiting others, right? That's a very interesting thing as well, as you talked about the Cyclops that I remembered.
That was great, Matt. Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I hesitated about whether I want to share this just because this is very like personal and like idiosyncratic, right? There's no sort of like systematic backing to this. It's just like anyway, you'll see what I'm talking about. For me, there's this Yud and Ayin have this interesting thing because for me, it's basically the beginning and end of signification in Hebrew, right? So Yud is easier to understand, right? Because the glyph of it is it's the smallest glyph. It's basically like the starting stroke, and that's all it is, right? And also the chirik, the vowel that, or like in the Masoretic text, the nikud that makes the same the sound, that delicate, it's a very delicate, fine, like tip of the tongue phoneme, right? It's the little French like petit, right? It's also a single dot, right? It's like the sort of minimum mark of meaning, right? That can convey information. Okay, that's maybe easier because we're used to thinking of yud as like the start, even though it's not the first letter in the alphabet. But okay, but then ayin is this weird, funky letter. Also, it's not the last letter, but in terms of physically producing the sound, right? It's one of two letters that has basically been lost, like in modern Hebrew, because ayin and chet have migrated up. So they used to be, like historically, if you're doing like Reconstructionist Hebrew or like some of the old Temani Jews, they're basically all dead now, but the ones who were actually moved, sorry about the dogs, the ones who were moved from Yemen to Israel, they still had the marking because it's still marked in Arabic, right? So they differentiate between the higher sound in the throat and the lower. And ayin is one of the lower ones. And it's not just one of the two lower ones, but it's the stop, right? So it's a glottal stop that is itself sort of at the lowest point in the whole. It's not even the mouth because you're in the throat at this point. And it is, because it's a stop, it's like the end, right? And there's kind of that double meaning in that nowadays, like no Hebrew speaker can even properly pronounce ayin, right? It's pronounced like aleph, right? As just if you're even pronouncing that at all, it's just going to be like a break, right? It's not, you're not going to gutturalize it with the same fullness, right? So it's like literally like beyond enunciation, beyond signification, right? So you have kind of the beginning and the end. But again, that's not backed up like numerologically. That's just kind of like, because I think I've shared this, like I did some translation work. I'm sort of a poet by trade, right? So I think a lot about sort of the physical production of phonemes, like as they move through like the throat, the mouth, like how they feel, how they sound. And so ayin and yud kind of stand out to me personally in that way.
Yeah, that was great. And let me just shout out Mario, Symbolic Studies. He just popped in the room. Thank you for joining us, Mario. Second space in a row. Not as nerve-wracking this time, I will say, and great episode that Mario did on my show. Preceded, of course, by Joshua the Branch. So 39 and 40. If you're interested in what those two homies have to say, which you should be, because they're interesting people with lots of interesting things to say. You can check that out. Obviously, they each have their own projects apart from my show. But yeah, if you want to check them out in conversation with me, that's a good way to do it. And Joshua, please go ahead.
Dude, I never thought about the fact that ayin contains the aleph. So we're really talking about the bullseye here, which is Aldebaran. I never made that connection before, so just kind of blew my mind. But what I actually wanted to come up and talk about was, what do all the people in the club we're not in? What is one of their gestures? They put the hand over the eye, so there's a hand in the ayin and yud right there. I mean, so that's pretty wild to me. I never really thought about it. So they purposefully do one hand or the other and one eye or the other. So I don't ever know which it is because cameras flip things, But anyway.
For sure, I totally agree with that. I think it's something interesting with the attribution of the covering of the eye, simply because it's something that you just said, Joshua, is that the camera flips things. Well, there's this idea in Tantra, like when you look at a Tanka, sometimes you are generative of the deity, like you are standing in front of the deity and you are generating the deity in a way through perceiving it. Obviously, we use that example for Tara when Solar sort of, I don't know, when we discuss that. And then there's also the self generation where you are the deity. I'm not saying anyone to do this. I'm just saying it's an idea. So Matt and I have even discussed this. Like, there's a way of looking at the tree and saying that the right and the left pillar are the right and the left pillar, but there's also a way that if you are the Adam Kadmon, if you are the man in the tree, then those are reversed. It's like, are you approaching the mural on the temple? There's an outer temple. You're approaching it at the entrance, like as a neophyte. But then there's also a way to look at it where you are exiting the temple, and so you are walking through the pillars, and then you reach your apotheosis as the secret third thing, as as you are the third pillar. So I don't know. I just thought that was kind of interesting to what you said, Joshua. Please go ahead.
That's I definitely vibe with that, because in the 3 degrees of masonry, you change your feet position, and the last one, of course, is the square. And so that would reflect exactly what you're saying here, because you approach as an entered apprentice, go to fellowcraft, and then master mason, right? So
Yeah, I think this is a very common. I don't like to use the word mystery school, but yeah, there is an element of that. It's certainly true in Tantra. However, we have kept it alive. So if you want to say it's a mystery school, not really, because this information is totally out there. It's a little more practitioner oriented, but it's definitely out there in the scholarship and in any books written about deity yoga. So I think it's a really interesting sort of way to frame it. Is this, especially from a art history or iconographical perspective, is that you're looking at your positionality changes depending on your view, depending on your perspective, depending on how you look at the deity, how far you are initiated. So, yeah, totally agree. Okay, so sorry, Joshua, I saw your hand. Please go ahead.
yeah, and one other thing I forgot to ask. I can't remember if it was Matt or Solar that mentioned the lost letter or nuance or accent, but that it was preserved in Arabic. Well, in Masonry, they're looking for the lost word, and that's related to resurrection. So it reminds me of the Shin, which is the letter added to the Tetragrammaton to have like that fifth element salvational aspect. But obviously, we know about the Shin, so it makes me wonder if maybe it's a Toggen or something like that that has been lost, like they were talking about. So anyway, I didn't know what exactly they were talking about, but that's what it made me think of, was the lost word of Freemasonry.
Well, I mean, this is the same, I think, throughout all esoterica. I've mentioned this the last week, is that I've been doing a series with Heidi Love on Nick's show on the Occult Rejects, and I've learned so much from her. And I know it sounds really surprising because, like, what can an ex-Mormon teach you, Jin, about magic and metaphysics? Well, a lot, actually, surprisingly. And so the Mormons are also looking for the keystone. So, and they also think it's a word, or it's to reference Fifth Element, it's like it's a word, or what did the guy from Order of Nine Angles call it? A keyword. So they just took that idea of the keystone and they made it a keyword. So what are the keywords? Are the sort of phrases for the angles, right? So yeah, I mean, I think that this is like the truth is like, what is it? Like Tantra has an answer. That's the difference. It's like we're not necessarily looking for it. We kind of already think it exists. We kind of know what it is. We have a conceptual layer, at least, to describe it, but we also know not to grasp at it. So this is like the difference. We wouldn't want to necessarily materialize it because that word might be just empty. That would be a very Buddhist way to describe it, which doesn't mean nothing. It's just very important. It's a very important distinction. It's a fine distinction, but and I've said it every single space that we've ever had, because I think it is such an important thing to say. Not that think I'm important, but just as an idea. Emptiness is massless and luminous. and infinite in its potentiality for compassion or loving kindness. So and that's what the primordial word is, or the renewed word, or the reborn word, or whatever it is. And that's what the bejas are. And they can be burnt and we talked about this. Solar specifically, and I spoke about this. They can be reborn. They can be burnt out, and they can also be reborn. So that also goes along with something Matt was saying, like how you can burn out certain keywords or phrase words, magical ones. Maybe you're the only one who's assigned them power, or like a vector. But you can still burn them out because you can share them overly. But you can also renew them. So that is more of a Buddhist idea. Yes, Joshua, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, that reminds me of how some of the rabbis will say Yud K Vav K instead of Yud He Vav He. I think it's like you were saying, to preserve. Well, they say you're not supposed to say the name of God, of course, in vain, but it's also perhaps to not take away from its potency, right? So if you're summoning that spirit every time you say that word, and it's showing up and you don't have orders or requests, then that's in vain, right? So I think that could be a part of that, right? So if you really were working with spirits and you didn't want them showing up for no good reason, right? But you still had to communicate that. And it made me think of when you mentioned earlier about the book of magic that you shared. There was you said mistakes in it, and it made me wonder if those were purposeful. I mean, if a magician put mistakes in a book, I would assume that's on purpose. It kind of reminds me of how Crowley reversed a couple of the tarot cards, like Justice and Strength. I was like, why did he do that? He would know better. But then, maybe he had his reasons, right? So anyway, I just wanted to comment on that. And also the other thing is, and shout out to Mario, North Pole, you might dig this. So the keystone made me think of the keystone of heaven. And so and then so if you put nuit or shu in heaven, that's going to probably hit around their navel, right? And it makes me think of the navel stone on Earth, Omphalos. The navel stone was like the midpoint. So if Omphalos stone on Earth is like the midpoint, then what is it in heaven? Is that mid-heaven, or where the pole is, maybe? And so then it got me thinking, is that where the Holy Spirit came from? Is through the vault in heaven, So the keystone might even be like a port, because in the flood story it talks about these vaults, and heaven has vaults, and like I guess these blockades were removed and the waters fell in. So maybe these keystones kind of are those like points in the firmament, or I don't know. I was just musing.
No, I think that's really interesting. There is a Buddhist parallel with the idea of the elemental treasuries. So not necessarily vaults, but they are thought of as vaults because they each have a yaksha king, or a little banker. I'm not making a racial joke. It's a little race of bankers. It's very, it's very, this series that I'm thinking of. Anyways, I'm sorry, Matt, please go ahead.
So one thing that all this Ayin talk made me remember here, as I was looking through the notes, is that you have on Genesis, when Adam and Eve fall, you have, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, blah, 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 Adam ate the thing. Then the eyes of them both were opened, right? So then again, you have the ayin there, their eyes being opened. The way that I noted this was that this was the letter. So this was me transcripting what my Kabbalah mentor was saying. This was the letter, so ayin, that Adam ate. So opening his third eye and making him get logged out of Eden, basically. And another thing as well, since Jin talked about Mormonism, I remembered, I think it's actually Jehovah Witnesses that also have a lot of the tower symbolism, like Watchtower or something like this. There's one of them, I don't remember now if it's Jehovah Witnesses or if it's another one, which also uses a lot this arcana.
No, you're totally right, Matt. Sorry to interrupt. Is that it is the guy who founded the Jehovah Witnesses was like a mage or a magician or whatever. I mean, it's so obvious. You can see his grave is a pyramid. It has 4 pillars around it. It has the eye symbolism. I mean, it's like, I mean, even when you first walk into any witness hall, there's like if you have just cursory knowledge of like Freemasonry or esotericism, just in a broad way, you'll instantly recognize. I mean, it's like I've never been in a witness hall, but I've seen pictures of other people's and explanations of it. So I absolutely, all of these outer temple religions, that's just what they are. The problem with them is that they often keep you under the will of whoever has made them, or whoever is teaching you, or whoever is the. I'm not unity. I think you all know this. Is that my issue is not. I don't have daddy god issues. Like that's totally fine. Shiva, I like Shiva. Okay, cool, fine, great, no problem. Um, but sometimes people can also feel like the text is also restrictive because it can run counter to what they think their will is. But again, what is your will? It's not the aggregates of desire. It's not, and I'm not even using that in a Buddhist metaphysical way. I'm saying that, yeah, there are many aggregates that are not yours, that are not part of your consciousness, that if you've kind of applied on, and then the world has kind of applied on. So, like advertising, people often especially for all of us in our circle, we often discuss this, like how is media used as both a weapon, and then also the way we think of it in the lodge is like, how can we turn it around? How can we reverse the polarities and use it maybe more in a hermetic or hermeneutic, right? That's often how I think of it, at least, and how I try and relay it in the spaces. So, I think that a lot of our desires, like the things we want, even sexuality, even like all of that, I think that's a lot more put upon us. I'm not saying you don't physically feel something. I'm saying that, we weren't bombarded with these kind of psychic images, if you want to call it that, for most of our history, right? Like, yeah, it's existed, but it's not in the same way, not in the same degree, not in the same medium. So it's radically shifted. It's also shifted our consciousness with it. So I think we have to be aware and perceptive of the ways that it shifted us. So yeah, I think that that's a really. I was going to end it at 2 hours 22, but I realized that that's not really fair to Solar, because I actually was going to read through the Lesser Banishing Pentagram, which I still will if you guys want to keep going. And also, you guys were having a great discussion, so there's no way I could, jump in and be like, yeah, we're going to end the space. That's not really fair. So we will keep going for another hour. Uh, we don't have to stick 100% to the book, but I do want to get some in for Solar, because obviously, and I also want to discuss it because I think it's really interesting stuff that I think that is practical for, maybe not for the 3 co-hosts, but for for anyone who's maybe not familiar with this kind of ritual, Western ritual magic, framework. Okay, so Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram. So he starts with something really interesting. So he starts with a ritual bath. Now, I have discussed this a few times just in passing. There is probably nothing that I think is more important than ritual bathing. I think it's so important that I hesitate to de-emphasize it in any way. I think that it has deep metaphysical implications. I think it's extremely important. I don't think that your ritual purity is everything, obviously. I think that there's also part of that, if you want to call it purity, that comes from like theurgic practices, that comes from like the practices of stainlessness. If you want to say that's just Vajrasattva.
Oops, think you muted yourself.
Apologize, my headset died, so if my sound sounds worse, that's why. But no, I'm just saying that ritual bathing is super important, but I also think it comes from the other practices. So don't be one of those people that places all the emphasis on ritual bathing. But yes, as a preliminary practice, and also to keep your spiritual space clean. This is something that I don't personally struggle with this, but I am familiar enough with Western magicians that I know that some of them have and do. So this is something important, and you don't need to have any crazy ritual to begin cleaning. Cleaning itself is a ritual. Now you can apply spiritual technologies to that action, make it even better, more potent. That's great. I think you should. But yeah, just if you're going to practice, have a clean ritual space. It doesn't have to be anything. Just you, yourself, your space, clean, both of you. So I think that's a perfect way to start, and something that people often forget about. And this is it's grimoire. It's like the foundations of the grimoire tradition of the Western ceremonial magic tradition. It also has ritual bathing as a foundation. So this is true for folk magic. This is true for higher magic. It's just a perennial truth. So, a great way to amend your baths is actually to add herbs. I'm not saying 50, but maybe 3, maybe even 1. So if you're going to add 1 herb to your bath, it has to be, well, I call it hyssop, but everybody knows I have a strange pronunciation. I pronounce Hebrew weird. I pronounce Indonesian weird. Everything. So it is hyssop. I don't use that word. I use hyssop. I don't know why. I just always use that. But it's hyssop official. But if you are going to use the Mexican variety, it's Augustache. It's perfectly fine. It's almost identical. And so that is, it may not be the herb that the Hebrews were speaking about for temple cleansing rituals, but interestingly, in like the Judeo Greco sort of Platonic stuff, it is the plant that they're talking about. So they would adopt that, which is a Mediterranean plant, obviously. And so they adopted that perhaps for like the stuff that was happening in Turkey and Greece. But if you're talking about what is biblical hyssop, may not be the same thing. But I digress. It's a bitter herb. It's a mint. It has a lot of camphor. It has a lot of lavender. It has it all. So if you're going to use one thing, use that. Lemongrass is also a good 1 herb. Cinnamon's okay. It can be skin sensitizing, so be careful with it. Definitely don't use the essential oil in your bath. But herbs like that, peppermint, rosemary, you want something a little bitter if you're going to bathe. This is just my preference. There is a time for sweet baths, and that's great for magnetizing and drawing things close to you. Very important. And you should never take away too much. Now, this is something that goes beyond the sort of discussion of bathing or cleaning, but there are people who I know who way overly cleanse both themselves and their ritual spaces. Now, you're asking me, how can you over cleanse a ritual space? Well, certain herbs, and not just herbs, but certain techniques have a kind of coffee. Coffee is a great neutralizing agent. Coffee grinds. You can use coffee grinds for many things. You can burn them as incense, but it has a neutralizing property. Now, this isn't necessarily the taking away of the good luck, but it can also neutralize it a little. So you want to make sure that you are using sweet herbs to replace what you take away if you are using bitter. Yes, Matt, please go ahead.
I don't know how common this is outside of Brazil, but in Brazil it's very common that if you feel like you have some dark stuff on you and so on, people use, I think it's called like rock salt. So it's like not the same salt you use usually for cooking, but it's bigger one. And sure, obviously it helps, but like Jin is saying, if let's say you are already kind of down, you're already with not that great energies, and you use something like this, it will sponge out all the energy. So it doesn't filter out just bad, it filters out everything. So it gets everything out of you. And then some people will even say like, oh, don't use this for your head. Like don't take bath with rock salt on your head, just from the, I think it's like neck down or something, because you can definitely do it too much. It's like if you treat it as a normal like pharmacy thing, is the same, right? You're not going to take 3 pills if the thing says for you to take just 1. Know the dose, basically.
Absolutely. Know the dose and know what you're doing and what substances you're using. So a great ritual bath would be like exactly what I said, like those herbs. Rosemary's great, hyssop's great, um, peppermint's great, like the live. Basil's also great, but you don't want to use basil. Not that any of you are doing graveyard stuff, but if you are doing graveyard stuff, you want to not use basil. So there's actually a reason for that, but I won't get into that. But that is a kind of tantric prescription as well. So don't use basil, but coffee is really great. You could use coffee grinds. You could also mix cocoa powder in. That's a sweetening agent, remember? So it draws like a little bit of sweetness, not overly. But if you're really struggling with affliction, you're going to need more than one bath, and you'll probably do a series, based on the lunar cycle. That's what I would, not that I would recommend to anyone to do anything, but if it was my issue, that's one of the ways I would deal with it. It would be certainly part of it. So I think that's a very good idea. Obviously, just you can use the general idea of waxing to bring things closer, to magnetize things in, and waning to, diminish the efficacy of those outside influences. So, but just remember that you have to replace any, energies, like Matt said, that you take away. You have to replace them, and you also have to build them up. So you should also be doing lucky things as you are doing bitter things. It's also a very interesting way to think about right and left instead of so Manichaean, so Western. For Hermeticism, like, yes, let's look to Latin America. They have some very interesting XY axis ideas of herbs, of spiritual, or I would say ritual grammars, ritual technologies, and they don't necessarily think about it in the black and white way. They kind of think about it as a little more dynamic. So I think that's an interesting thing, as just to reference that Matt clipped me saying something about Santeria from last week. Um, yeah, I think that's something interesting, actually. That is a very useful idea from their system that we can draw from. And so there's also, I just want to mention this because this is something that I know someone does, and I'm not necessarily friends with this person at all, but I just want to say that, and I did tell them this, but they use an herb called guinea hen weed. So it's Petiveria alishae. It is very, very, very. They also use it, yes, in Kimbanda. They also use it in Obeah from Jamaica, and they also use it in Santeria and Sanse and all those Afro-syncretic religions. It's a very powerful herb, and if you have the opportunity to buy some, I highly recommend it. It reeks, smells like sulfur, basically. That is one of the strongest cleansing anti-sorcery herbs that you can get. However, that herb actually makes you unlucky. It doesn't just take away the good luck, it doesn't just neutralize the good luck, it actually has a negative quality. So the person that I referenced chews it all the time and smudges with it all the time. So you can only imagine, if I'm saying that it's an unlucky herb, that doesn't mean never use it. There's a time and a place. You can use it for exorcism. You can use it for to get rid of, as I said, black magic, if you want to call it that. It's very powerful, and you have to combine it properly as well. That's why another good anti-sorcery herb, agrimony, is actually sometimes better because it has a neutrality where it's slightly sweet and it's Jupiterian in its nature. So it doesn't decrease your luck, and so those two things actually can be mixed together sometimes. And usually you do three, but you can use that and you can sort of minimize the property. So that's when you're thinking about like bathing or incense making, which are very similarly related. They're very closely related, parallel, we could say. You want to start thinking about the grammars in which things modify and affect each other. And if you're not comfortable doing that, then just use one herb. Just make sure that one herb lemongrass. Lemongrass is a very good herb because it's neutral, it's sweet, it's cleansing, but it doesn't take away, and it actually is lucky. So there's another one. Okay, so I am going to read Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram, and then we will let the boys talk, and then we will end. But yeah, so if anyone has anything else to say after I've read this portion, yeah, please do. Okay, so I'm not going to go over the preliminaries, ritual bath. He basically says what we all talked about. You do not, okay, so in my opinion, coming from a ritual bathing culture, you don't dry yourself off with a towel. Now, he says that. I personally wouldn't. I would let myself air dry. This is a much more quote unquote, air quote, Matt. I see you're hundreding. Yeah, I agree. It's much more maybe folk magic in its presentation to do air dry, but it actually, I actually think it's the better way to do it. So you let the, especially if you're using herbs or rock salts, as Matt said, like if you are using a magical substance in your bath, or a spiritual, maybe not a magical substance is the wrong word, but a spiritual technology like a plant or a mineral in your bath, then why would you wipe it off yourself? Don't you want its effects to carry with you through time and space, as we always discuss? Yes. So air dry. Yes, it is not always comfortable. Suck it up, buttercup. Okay, there's a lot harder things in magic than like not toweling for 15 minutes. So that's a really a proper magician's bath, to be honest, what we just talked about. So okay, so that is the preliminary. Yes, you should pray. If you're so inclined, Psalm 51 is always really great. Psalm 88 is a bathing psalm in particular. It's not as 88 is perfectly good, so it's perfectly good for anyone. It's one I like. I like 51, but I'm a high salt person. I am a Sagittarius. I like that Jupiter energy it brings. Okay, so let's see what we have. Okay, so if you have them, put the 4 tools which represent the magical elements on the top of the altar. Remember, have all of them present or use none of them. Put the major arcana cards in a pile on top of the altar too. Bring a chair into your area so that you can sit. As you can see in the diagram, you should be facing the east. If you have candles, light them. Turn out any electric lights you have burning. Of course, if it is daylight, you want to pull the drapes or close the curtains, etc. Your goal should be to have the room lit only by candles. Also, light any incense you wish to burn at this time. So I will just quickly intervene here and just say that this is not quite how I approach it. Okay, so I'm not saying that I do the lesser vanishing pentagram like ever, but I have done it. But this is not how I would approach the procedure in my Buddhist way, even if I was doing this way, because I know that I'm okay with the daylight. I practice in the morning, usually like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning. So it's not quite daylight, but sometimes you do see the sun peeking out when you're practicing, and that's fine. No big deal. Incense, I have a specific prayer, offering prayer that I do. Candles, yeah, I have an offering prayer before I light them. So I have a little bit of a different procedure, but yeah, it's totally fine. I also face east. That's our prescribed direction for Buddhism. Not all Buddhists face east. Some will face north. Some will face northeast. Those are all perfectly fine directions. They're considered auspicious. Northeast in particular is related to Ganapati, so the Ganesha, the elephant-headed deity. So he kind of opens the road. So a lot of people like to face that direction because he can allow the prosperity or whatever it is to flow through. That's perfectly fine. Yeah, you can do that. So I think that's all good advice. I sit on the floor. That's me. But I also do it in a Buddhist way. I also do sadhana. I also do prostration. So sitting on the floor is no big deal for me. But I will say, when I used to experiment more with this style, I would also sit on the floor. So that's just me. If you want to sit in a chair, that's fine. I was always told in very strong terms that it changes the alignment of the prayers that you are doing, the sounds you are making, and your orientation to the altar. So I prefer not to sit in a chair. I also shift when I do sadhana. So I like my back might straighten out when I'm doing syllables. That's totally normal. You might hiccup. Some people burp. I don't burp. I hiccup. But that's totally normal because you're getting the mal air, if you want to call it that, out of your system. You're letting the energy channel through as a figure 8 properly. through your system, through the words. So yeah, there are going to be things. You're going to feel your posture change. This is just slight adjustments, excuse me. But the longer you do the sadhana, like the longer in the sense of like the more long term it is, if you've done it for 5 or 6 years or 10 years or 20 years, your adjustments are going to be more subtle over time, but they're still going to happen. So it will always be a way of working out the energy. So I just prefer sitting, I prefer being on the floor. It's a good posture thing. If you're interested in Buddhism or Tantra, you have to sit on the floor. So figure out a way to make that work if you're so inclined. But of course, you don't have to. You can use a chair, as he says. Yes, Joshua, please go ahead. I'm adding you right now. Yes, Joshua, sorry, I just added you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, my apologies. I actually didn't want to comment as you were reading. I was going to try to give more time to you all, but I did want to comment on one thing. So you mentioned the Northeast, and that's associated with abundance and those sorts of things and flowing blessings or something. Well, in our Masonic lodge, that is where the treasurer sits. That's where his seat is. So I just thought you might find that funny.
Absolutely. It makes perfect sense too, because that is, that's what it is. The East is East, right? We even had a lodge space about this. Yes, Matt, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to quickly comment on something that I remembered as you were saying about the ritual. So you can do this, I guess, for this kind of ritual as well, but just in general. Let's say you're going to somewhere and you want to get a little bit more protection, or you want to work a specific arcana. Something interesting you can do is you can have the drawing. If you can draw it perfectly, if not, you use like a printer or something of the arcanas that you want to work, or even all the arcanas, whatever. If you want to go all in, it's up to you if you can handle it. But you print it out or you draw it, and you basically put this in water and let it like sit on hot water so that the water gets the tint and the energy and the stuff, and then you can bathe with that as well. And that is fucking powerful, because again, you're basically um, bathing yourself with the energy of the arcana. So that's something very interesting as well you can do, because if at the end of the day, what you're doing with let's say I want to work a specific arcana and I don't have its herbs or its minerals at home, you can use the image of it itself, because again, you're trying to link yourself to that energy. So sure, you can use the physical, or you can use the, let's call it digital or spiritual. The same as having like a homeopathic thing at home, right? So I think that's a very interesting thing you can do as well, just not for this kind of ritual, but just overall as well, if you want to do a specific bath.
Yeah, Matt, I'm so glad you said that. That's really great. So yes, of course, the spiritual technology of matter, so the plants or the herbs or the essential oil, that's secondary. That's like, yes, it's preliminary. Like you should do a bath before you enter the ritual working, but it's really in your mind. So there is a way to do it where you simply, as Matt said, visualize. You can even do it with herbs. Okay, lavender, that's easy for everyone to do. You just imagine the texture, the scent, the color, exactly what it looks like, maybe a time you've interacted with it. It's like a sense memory, right? So you would draw all those things in if that's what so lavender is a plant of Mercury. So if that's what the energy you're trying to invoke, friendship, love, maybe not love, but like friendship. We'll say friendship. That's a good neutral way to think of lavender. So there you kind of you build upon its spiritual reality in your mind. Carry it with you through space and time, because you carry with you memories. You carry memories with you through time and space. So if you have a strong enough memory, that can translate into a visualization of equal or at least very strong potency. So yes, you can, if you have nothing, but everybody does have salt, so you can always use salt. People also have sugar. You can also use sugar. Again, Those are two different polarities, so know what you're doing. But if you have very few implements, use your mind. Totally valid. In fact, I would say maybe the next step after doing sort of these outer rituals is to be able to perform them in the inner temple, which is, of course, in your mind. It's not really in your ritual space. And in fact, I would say that it's even the secret layer is the ability to perform these rituals in the, if you want to call it mind palace, that's fine. We'll call it that. But then also to do it while you are interacting with material reality. Now, this is something that has been a long, sort of ongoing discussion, I would say, in the lodge. Like, yes, we recognize that this is a very potent, very almost universal, nearly universal way of thinking about magic, like a performance that nobody else can see because it's happening totally in your mind while you are outside in reality. So the unification of those things plus speech. So your speech also should be part of this. It's not just mind, it's not just speech, it's not just body, it's all three things, plus the secret fourth thing, right? Plus perception, so that's the fifth thing. So you are, that is where you're at true sort of single pointedness, like where you are able to, if your will is an arrow or a sword or the tip of it at least, then that is where you're truly at that single point, is where you're able to penetrate all the densities with a single thought, the epinoia, the logos, whatever it takes shape in the world is through the single point. But that is a little more complicated, and it's, as Matt very cleverly said, very easy to visualize something you don't intend to if you cannot control your mind. So this is also makes a great point of why meditation is important. Now, it doesn't have to be Vipassana. It doesn't have to be mantra recitation like I do. It doesn't have to be, as Solar called it, Dzogchen, but it can be. Those can be tools that you can learn. I do think Dharma has the best meditation techniques. That's just my opinion, but I think it's useful for everyone. I think there's a style of meditation that will work for everyone. I love a mantra, so I'm a reciter. That's what I like. I like deity yoga. Yeah, I'm excited to do deity yoga, so that's what I do. But again, that's not for everyone. Some people like just strictly Dzogchen. This is an idea in Buddha, in a lot of Buddhist circles, that there's a lot of Dzogchen practitioners who don't necessarily believe in the same things that like religious Buddhists, like maybe more like me, would believe in. But that's okay, because if they're following Dzogchen, then that's fine. And they're going to that sort of space where of a Rigpa. So they're still reaching the same maybe conclusion, or ontologically equivalent conclusion, but maybe not the same exact way. But their view might be the same. So we could recognize each other as doing a similar process, but even if it's not exactly the same method. So so I'll continue now. So sit in the chair facing east and do the relaxation ritual. Now stand still facing east. Take the dagger, not the air dagger, in your right hand, or point with your finger as described in the last lesson. I skipped that. I'm sorry. If you want to go back and reread that. Know that you are in the presence of God and the ritual has begun. I would say that takes place more in your head, and we would call that in deity yoga sealing the circle. Yes, it's very similar sounding. Okay, part one, the Kabbalistic cross. Step one, visualize yourself getting larger and larger, taller and taller, until you tower above the room you are in. Continue this growing visualization until the city you live in is small beneath your feet. See the continent as tiny compared to your majestic body. Now, even the earth is small beneath your feet. However, no matter how small the earth is, it is still firm and solid beneath your feet, anchoring you to the ground. You will not float away. So interestingly, from the last week, we talked a little bit about the difference between Merkaba and Hekalat. This is clearly a Merkaba working, because why? He's drawing the energy down to him. Interesting. Okay, so he's saying that the body is the mind palace, which it is, but maybe not the body until it's unified at all three levels, all three kayas. Okay. Next, visualize yourself growing so large that the planets of our solar system are like tiny toy rubber balls spinning near your feet. Soon they are too small to see, as even the Milky Way galaxy becomes a small dot of light at your feet. Now visualize a dot of light coming from somewhere far above your head. Know that this is only a tiny bit of the light from the source, and if you saw the brightness of this light, you would immediately be blinded and quite possibly go insane. This tiny bit of the endless, limitless light forms a brilliant white sphere of pulsating light just above your head. It is 9 inches in diameter, about the size of a dinner plate. It is brighter than 10,000 suns. This is an idea clearly from Tantra. This is how it's always described: wisdom fire, brighter than 10,000 suns. Okay, that's fine. But still only a tiny portion of the source of the divine spiritual white light. For us, it's obviously not white light, it's really whatever color flames are, so it's wisdom fire. It can also be blue, depending. But still only a tiny portion. Point to that sephira over above your head with your dagger or finger and bring it down by pointing to your forehead. So you are doing ritual gesticulations, but you are also obviously conceptually thinking of it and visualizing it at the same time. So, sorry, I just lost my spot, but I will find it again. I apologize, guys. And so the book, the reason why I skipped the beginning lesson is because he really just talks about the tools and like the order of the elements. So, it's not that I don't think it's important. It's just that we've obviously talked about those things 5 million times. So I don't necessarily know if it was super important for us to do so again. But anyways, I digress. Okay, Matt, please go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick thing. You mentioned the gesture, and it's something that, I don't know, might seem silly to people sometimes, but it's really like you have to use the 4 elements, right? So you have the imagination part, so all the visualization, everything. So that's the fire you're activating. Then you have the powerful words you're speaking, the stuff you're saying, basically, which will be air. Then you have the emotions you have to feel, because it doesn't matter if you're doing a ritual and you're not feeling anything. It's the same as nothing. It's like even if you go to church and you just do the prayer and you don't feel anything, might as well don't go. Like literally, it's not doing anything for you. So you gotta feel the emotion, which if you cannot trigger yourself, like let's say, if I'm doing like, there's specific rituals that I do every day or that I do a lot of the times that when I'm going to do it, I can already like trigger either, I don't know, some goosebumps or whatever. So it's like I'm feeling something. But if you can't, usually a little bit of, let's say, if you like clap your hands really strongly, you're gonna feel something like a little bit of pain, and that makes you feel until you get to that point of triggering it yourself. But lastly, something that sometimes feels cringe, but it's there. We have to do it as well if you want to use the 4 elements, which is the gestures. So like the gestures and the movements. So that's like Earth acting. So, and then you see this every time. Like go watch a fucking salesman coaching thing. You know, the guys are gonna be gesturing all the time, like pointing and doing this with their hands and so on. Like see Trump, see all those big guys like Musk, whatever. They're always doing something with the body, because like otherwise, again, you're not using one of the elements, so you're not creating space for the 5th to come and compromise everything, right? So it's very interesting, and something that, again, you have to do it with intention. That's why you need a certain kind of, let's say, also muscle intelligence, like body intelligence as well, to be able to do the movements. And that's why I think also yoga in this kind of things is very important, or at least some kind of martial art, whatever, something that you use your body so that you don't become super in tune with the higher chakras and not in tune at all with the lower ones. You get too above the clouds. You gotta ground yourself a little bit as well.
Sorry about that. Yes, Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, so, and I apologize if I'm jumping the gun on this. I was listening the whole time, but I had to take my dogs out, so I haven't been looking at the PDF. So if you are going to get to the Gnostic Cross or have you, whatever, I just wanted to get to that for a second. Although the point is a little more universal, I think. So one thing that struck me is for my couple of years when I tried to be a good ortho bro, right? You end up, in liturgy or just in services in general, you end up making the sign of the cross a lot, right? Which is reversed from how a Catholic will do it in terms of the right and the left. But the point is this: is that in a practical way, during whatever service, let's just say liturgy, um, the for thine is that's basically the audio trigger. So it's for thine is the kingdom, and then the kingdom is when you go up. That's when you actually make the first point, right? So in terms of like the syllables of that mantra that are actually linked to gesture, the first one is actually kingdom up, and then power and glory forever. Amen. And so one thing I thought was really interesting is that in that version of the repetition, and I'm not making some like conspiratorial argument that like the Orthodox Church is trying to like invert this or like fuck it up. It's just, this was just like, looking at it very practically for how it's done as you're following along liturgy. But what happens is in the version that like Catholics, Orthodox, that you do it that way. One, the thine, the atah, right? The divine is actually misplaced. The divine has no location at all in this gestural spatial schema, right? Which is kind of interesting. And then as a follow-on to that, because you're getting all mixed up, the kingdom is in a completely wrong place. Now, I think he did make a note that like in the Golden Dawn version of the Gnostic Cross, the kingdom is located in the chest, whereas in his version and the version that I'm familiar with, the kingdom is below you, like you're literally standing on the kingdom, right? Your feet are on the kingdom. Anyway, but the point is, and then of course you have like further problems, right? Like because like forever, or basically, time gets mixed in with glory, or like gets offset of glory instead of power and glory, right? It destroys the symmetry of the tree. It destroys a lot of things when you sort of like when you sort of get off track. But I guess where this was going is that I think it's a very important and powerful thing to always have in mind: where am I? Where am I standing? Where is the divine in relationship to me? And where is the kingdom? Right? And that is just a very like helpful and grounding thing to have in mind, not just like when you're performing ritual activities, but when you're doing anything at all, frankly. Like that's just like, it's something that I think ideally we would sort of never lose track of, and we would have that as just like a basic part of how we understand ourselves and how we move through the world, in the same way that like I don't really have to think about like where my hands are, you know? Just like to have this kind of like fundamental awareness of like where is the divine, and then like where am I, and like what am I doing? I.e., where is the kingdom? Where is the site of my activity? Right. I don't know. It just struck me how powerful that could be, and how because of sloppiness in ritualistic execution at a super like low, like normie level in church, how the schema just gets completely obliterated, because it's done without any thought, and then it loses its ability to ground us and place us in that way.
Yeah, thank you so much, Solar. Incredibly well said. I don't really have anything to add to that, but I agree with you 100%. I think that the orientation perspectival relationship that you have, because the climbing of the tree is very disorienting, right? You have to cross several waters, maybe an abyss or two, and things can obviously look reversed. We're talking a lot about water, a lot about, I mean, water is also a mirror. Things, and as Joshua said, like even the tree can, even your right and left hand can be disorienting, because it's not necessarily the right and the left that you are used to, or the up and the down that you are used to. So I think that there's something really interesting there, and I appreciate that. And I also say that in a lot of Afrosyncretic folk magic, they will actually use the Orthodox style of the cross as the sort of magical way to do it. So the uncrossing would be the Orthodox way, and then the crossing, meaning that the blessing style, would be the Catholic way. And maybe you would even modify which hand you use to do the cross. I'm just saying this is a very folk magic thing, but it is an interesting, obviously, addendum to what a working ritual magician might do. Okay, so yes, Joshua, please go ahead.
Thank you. I was going to talk about that, the sign of the cross. When I did attend Orthodox church, I noticed everybody did do that, and I agree. I didn't feel like they were doing it properly. So in my mind, or silently to myself, I actually used the name of God, Yud He Vav He. So I assigned Yud to the head, just like if you were to take the characters and write them out on the paper, you can make the human out of it, right? The human vessel. So I'd start with the head as Yod, and then do the arms, the shoulders, and as He, because the He is, I mean, in this case, it is the arms, right? And your second He is the legs, but your Vav would be your bottom torso. And unless, of course, you're seated, you're going to be standing and probably doing ending at Yesod, right, which is foundation. So I think that's kind of interesting. We don't actually go all the way. Now, they do prostrate too on the floor sometimes, which would be totally the kingdom, right? And it reminds me too of David saying, I am a worm, right? So prostration has its place too. And I think that's closer to the kingdom. Whereas the sign of the cross, I think, they're probably really terminating in Yesod or foundation, which is curious to me because of the story of David. You were talking about ritual bathing and such. Well, he was witnessing Bathsheba ritual bathing on the roof, and he sent her husband into battle and killed him, and then took her as a wife. And he wasn't allowed to build the temple because of his sins of shedding so much blood, and of course doing what he did with Bathsheba. But so he was, however, allowed to build the foundation. So that would be Yesod in a sense too. So I just found that curious, and I wanted to mention that. But I do think the handedness of it does matter. And in fact, in Orthodox lore, there was even a schism in the church just over the fingers themselves, like which fingers you used, much less the hand. But anyway, I just wanted to comment on that.
No, that was great, Joshua. I'm glad you did, because I obviously know that you and so well, I knew Solar had attended or attempted Orthodoxy a little bit. I didn't know to the extent, but I know that you did, Joshua. So I was hoping that you would chime in, and thank you for that. And I agree. I think these are all ritual methodologies. I think that's what you can break it down to. If you want to look at Catholicism or Orthodoxy as the outer temple religion, maybe Orthodoxy is a little more inner temple in its preservation of the esoterica. I think maybe that's true, both true and not true at the same time. But I think that you can just look at it like these are ritual methodologies they've preserved. They're a little fixed. They're probably not as instantaneously adaptable as some other ritual methodologies can be, but useful to learn, especially if you are doing something oriented towards Christian theurgy. So, or a lot of the I'm not saying that Judaism and Christianity are the same, or even, like, I think the interrelationship's a lot more nebulous and also much more interlinked than, I don't want to get myself in trouble here, much more interlinked than people understand. But I also think that there are paths of Kabbalistic Judaism, like where you're doing mystical Judaism, where you are reaching very similar conclusions to the Christian Kabbalah. So I think that, again, it kind of, you're you know the a lot of the outer form is just that. So yeah, I think that that's probably good to keep in mind. But I also appreciate that everybody brought their ortho bro knowledge, where I am admittedly very weak. So okay, let us keep going. Okay, step 2. Oh no, we said this one. Oh no, we did not. Okay. So while pointing to your forehead, vibrate ta. Boldface syllable denotes emphasis. Step 2. Bring the point of the dagger or your finger firmly down your body until you are pointing toward the ground. Your head with the blade should be covering your groin. As you do this, visualize the light in your head coming down along with the blade or finger, down through the body and beyond your feet down to eternity. Vibrate Malkut. Well, that's interesting, and I think obviously Solar responded to that. Step 3, now bring the blade to your right shoulder. As you do this, visualize the beam of white light running down the center of your body. Form a beam from the heart area out to the right, past the blade at your right shoulder. See the beam of light extend to the end of the universe and beyond. Focus on this beam and vibrate. Okay, I'm not gonna repeat it. Vig Bula. Okay. I don't know. Yeah, I guess
It's
yeah,
like
whatever.
Gebura.
That's what I figured, but
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, for me, it's a little weird to do it like that. I'm much more comfortable when he uses like the more standard romanization of the Hebrew. But okay, I'll try. I'll be outside my comfort zone. So Vibura. Step 4, move the point of the blade horizontally to your left shoulder. As you do, visualize the beam of white light extending through infinite space to your left. As you focus on this beam of light, vibrate Vig Dula. So this is obviously very interesting. All three boys and I often discuss Gebura and Gedula and how they must be in the synthesis. Obviously, we know, yes, Joshua, we know that there are some flame enjoyers amongst us. However, as the co-leader or the co-host, maybe I'll say that I do like the synthesis. So okay, so I'm glad he said that, and notice that he did say infinite space. So this is something that you'll often hear me say. I did not get it from Mr. Craig, but it is a concept from Buddhism. So that I've just borrowed or adapted or maybe utilized in a skillful way, you could say. So that's also that. Step 5. Clasp your hands at your chest as if praying. If you are using a dagger, the point should be up, not pointing away from you, not to the sides or down. Visualize within your chest at the point covered by your folded hands, a brilliant golden glow. Vibrate Leolam. Amen. Matt, Solar, do you have any linguistic notes for me on that? I'm not sure what that even means.
Yeah, Olam is like the word, right?
Oh, okay.
So you have
You're
Malkut
right.
as the kingdom, then Gebura, Gedula, and Olam. So you see, basically, this ritual is basically like you're doing the cross, right? Like a normal person would do it, but you're doing all the elements. You're doing the visualization, the sensations, so water, the saying, so you're vibrating. Like if you actually want to do this, you are not gonna say Malkut, you're gonna say Malkut or something like this. Like you're gonna properly vibrate the things, and the earth. So you're moving your arms while doing this. So again, you're doing all the 4 elements.
That's great, Matt, and I also appreciate it because as I said, I'm not even comfortable with Hebrew in general, but to pronounce it, and I got over my initial embarrassment of doing it in front of Solar, but I and but at the same time, I am a frequent mispronouncer of all things, and I do this sometimes consciously and sometimes unconsciously. And I think it's actually a good magical self-defense tool, but I don't necessarily do it for that on purpose all the time. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But okay, so you are seeing me in a bit uncomfortable because I'm not necessarily used to his romanization style. So, but this makes complete sense to me in a tantric way because, of course, you start out with the primordial syllables, Om, Ah, Hong. So you would do it maybe not as I did a little light, I guess, for you guys, but you've heard me, I think, say it a little more with more potency or more power. So it's very similar. Those three, you recite them. You imagine the white light. You imagine the red light at your throat, and then you imagine the blue light in your heart space, and you collapse it all into that blue light into infinite space. So I do understand what they're talking about. I have a different way of going about it, and I'm also uncomfortable with Romanization. Yes, please, Joshua.
Can you hear me? The sound kind of went weird all of a sudden.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. So the Gavura thing was what I was thinking of when you think of the Egyptian pharaoh. He too is making the sign of the cross, but he's crossing it in an X, which is like the Chi Rho version of the cross, as it were. So he's wielding the shepherd's crook in his right hand. So that's the chesed element. But then also he has the flail in his left hand. So I was just thinking about, well, if you are wielding the sword or dagger, which hand are you, like, is your intention cruelness or kindness or severity or mercy? Like, that could be a thing too, because the Bible does talk about doing, not letting your left and right hand know what the other's doing. So it would almost suggest that if you were doing something not so good, you would want to only do it with your left hand, right? And so that you're clumsy. You're not doing it with precision, so on and so forth. So if there is any will for it to occur, it will happen much less because of you and more so because it should, perhaps. I don't know. It's just one interpretation, perhaps. But then right hands you normally associated with like blessings and preservation and mercy and those things. So if you're using a sword in that manner, like liberation, so on and so forth, that might be a different way. And because I was thinking, like, if you the gangster Kabbalah, that you could use a gun just in the same way. And I was thinking of the tetragrammaton clerics of Equilibrium. They were making all those different pathways with their guns, and so their goal was to like cover all the different angles in the room. But anyway, there's this stuff, passing thought, that came to mind.
Well, I think it's interesting that you brought that up in reference to that movie with Christian Bale where they do gun fu. Obviously, that's about angles. Kabbalah's about angles. Magic's about angles. Black magic's about angles. I think there's something really interesting, Joshua, that you just said that people can think about, at least in a conceptual way. And the gun, obviously, I've related the flintlock metaphor for Gavura hundreds of times, maybe dozens at least. So yeah, you're firing that energetic. You're changing potential energy into kinetic energy. That's literally what Gavura does. So you're releasing the potential of the angle by firing the gun. Yes, Matt, please go ahead.
Something very interesting that I just noticed, like usually I don't do the Kabbalistic cross, but I just noticed right now, is that the guys say, and I looked it up, like other guys will say the same, that you should vibrate Gevura on the right shoulder. So when we talk about perception again, they are overlaying the tree without inverting it, quote unquote, to the right place. As in your right side, like your right arm, would be Gedula, and your left arm would be Gevura. I'm not sure if that's like why exactly they make that, but it's interesting to notice.
I would add one more thing too. It's like the concept of punishment. Like, imagine if you were punishing your child, you don't want to spank them with your right arm. That's over the top, right? But if you spank them with your left hand, well, I'm left-handed, but most people aren't. So you would want to spank them with their non-dominant hand, right? Because you don't want to do it to the extreme. So that's kind of the principle too, of like how we're punished or corrected by whatever the unseen forces are.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that. Please, Solar, go ahead.
I just want to say, speak for yourself. I mean, whether I'm actually disciplining a child or trying to shoot my tiny ass LCP carry pistol, or whether I'm wielding the sword of Manjushri, trying to cut through Maya and see, basically view the world through Rigpa. I don't know. I want the precision and the control of my dominant hand, right? Again, I think this is like, this gets to this sort of second point where we're talking about like the sort of like different linguistic variations. the version of the Gnostic cross, the ritual that I'm most familiar with, is one I encountered in my teenage years. So it's in Liber Null and Psychonaut. I'm 90% sure. Maybe it's the next Carol book. I forget what the next one's called, but it's in one of the Carol books, right? And he reproduces a version of it that is the you go to the shoulders, but like you were saying, but it's not inverted, so Gevura is on the right. But at the same time, he's completely replaced the syllables with the English language vowels, right? So it's not Hebrew, it's not Sanskrit, it's not Tibetan, it's just you know? And I don't know, I'm not saying that these things are all interchangeable or they're all equivalent or whatever, but I'm saying like at a certain level, these things have been mixed and remixed and sort of recontextualized so many times that I feel like at least 80% of it has to be one's familiarity and confidence in whatever paradigm you're using. Like what you're doing should make sense to you. The reasons should be good and good enough for you, right? But at the point where you're getting like, you know, if you're spending weeks of your life trying to figure out like which set of sacred like syllabants you should assign to this, like instead of just doing this and building up your capacity like through practice and practical experience, like maybe your priorities are off. You know, again, I'm not trying to like say none of these things matter, but you know.
Yeah, I know Joshua's waiting. Just 1 second, Joshua. Let me say this: is I 100% agree. I think this, just from my time, like being a shit poster on Bog, like the Become a Living God forum, and of course I remember. I think it is. I think you're right, Solar. It is in Liber Null, but it could also be in the next one. You are right about that. And now I'm completely can't remember anything, but regardless, I think that you are correct. Is that it? Don't let the correspondences or the systems. Don't let that inhibit you. Have your reasons, have your logic proof of why you want to do and the way you want to do it, and that's fine. And so I agree. And so the interesting thing about bringing up Peter Carroll is this is a guy that suggested that you could use the Captain Crunch character to do ritual, or like not ritual, but magical workings. So I think that's interesting. Is that yeah, things have to make sense for you. They have to make sense simply in the way that you can perform it either visually or ritually. So yeah, you don't have to be fixated on like the most coherent of grammars, the most coherent of systems, but you do have to have control of your mind. So that is something that I think the traditional literature teaches you in a passive way through the practices, just like Solar said, like through the practices, that's what builds capacity. That's what even in Buddhism, that's what builds lung. That's what literally what builds they call it the pitter patter of, they don't call it pitter patter, but they call it it's the galloping of the wind horse moving through your body. So it's the rhythm of the words. If those are primordial seeds, then that's primordial seeds. If it's a Dharani sutra, it's the words of the sutra. If it's just a regular sutra, it's those. If it's the Pali Sutta, maybe they don't imagine the wind horse probably, but I'm sure they have an interrelated concept. So yeah, that's really what it is. It's so I think that, yeah, I agree 100%. I also think probably it's not the best to mix everything yourself until you are, as Matt said, comfortable in like the system. It's like, don't try to be a remixer right away. There is an element where you can be flexible, like Solar said, like you have to be able to take the leap. But so you don't want to get stuck, but also like maybe or at least for the beginning, try and stick as best you can to what is presented. Now, like we all said, there are different versions of this ritual. There's probably dozens and dozens and dozens. Each one they say is the purest, refined, original, most primordial, from the angels, from the demons, whatever, or from God, from Metatron, from Enoch, whatever it is. So that's fine. It's probably all bullshit. I mean, they've been refined. Okay, so it is what it is. So you're using the methodology that has been left here, the technology of performance, and you are just going to do it. And you're not going to get too intellectual, too cerebral. This is often my issue, not with magic, but in life, is you don't want to be overly cerebral because you want to be able to perform. So you don't want to let the the analytical mind get in the way of ritual performance. So yeah, I think that that's what Solar said is excellent. And then please, Joshua, go ahead. I'm sorry.
The wind horse and music reference, I couldn't help but think of the Legend of Zelda opening cutscene where the horse is galloping and you hear that ocarina and harp. Anyway, what I was going to say is I neglected to mention, of course, that you'll find sometimes, like the yin yang, you'll find the opposite within you'll find a little bit of in the opposite of what it is. I guess what I'm trying to say is you can find mercy in severity and severity and mercy. For instance, you mentioned you would only want to use your gun with the right hand. Well, of course, because you're probably protecting a life, right? So the taking of a life or whatever, or the defense would be in a justified manner, right? So that makes sense. Where you wouldn't want to do it is like a Vash the Stampede anime character where he's shooting people, but he doesn't want to kill them, right? So he's purposefully not practicing with his dominant hand, probably, right? So I'd say it's in an occasion where, like, you want to shoot somebody in the leg or whatever. You're not trying to kill them. But then the opposite would be when you're using your right arm in a very violent manner. Well, in Greek, the word for that is harpazo, which is a violent seizing, right, with the right arm of the Lord. So where something we would normally see like with a left hand, we're seeing with a right hand. Well, that to me is like your child's crossing out into the street and a car's coming. You yank out with your right hand and jerk them in. Yeah, it might hurt him, might even hurt him, right? But what would have happened to him would have been much worse had you not exercised that severity in the right hand in that moment. And that's just instinctual, right? But anyway, I just wanted to paint that out, like that you'll find an element of the opposite in it too. So I guess it depends on the intention. That was kind of the point I was trying to make.
No, that was great, and I'm glad that you guys discussed that. So I think I think I like it when you guys speak and like explain from your perspectives, because even though I might give you both shit, not really, but in a mild way, I think that I learned so much, so it's worth it for me. Honestly, I even when I was recording with Chris today, Joshua, I was like, I even said to him so many times, I was like, "Oh yeah, Joshua, I can see why Joshua likes you." 'Cause he started talking about like flame and ash, and I was like, "Okay, I can build off this. There's something here." And then, especially if we're talking about Avatar: The Lost Airbender and firebending, it's like it makes complete sense, right? So, yeah, I think it was really interesting. So I've obviously absorbed, maybe not consensually, but I've absorbed a lot from you and Solar by proximity. So, and it has actually added to my greater body of knowledge. So, I don't dismiss it in any way. I just might challenge it, but that's just my way. So, I'm a Mercurial Prince. What can I say? Okay, so we will finish this off, and hopefully our designated time is 10:14, so that will exactly be 3 hours and 30 minutes. I will try, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so we'll keep going. Yes, there we go. So, okay, so now blade out your right shoulder, left shoulder. Clasp your hands as if praying. If you're using a dagger, the point should be up, not pointing away from you, nor to the side. Okay, I already said this. Lambrick, which Matt had to explain to me because I am Western ceremonial retard, as is the official name for that. Okay, so let's see. So yes, in fact, in sadhana, you do also clap. So I think that's interesting, and you can actually do the Om Ahum with 3 claps. So I think that's another obviously similarity between those things. And again, to reference Ram, it is something that captures space, right? Like you are cleansing the space. Maybe you are creating like the thunderclap in space. So it's kind of an interesting way to frame it. Yeah. I think that's an interesting way to frame it. I'm sorry, guys. I just lost where we were because I closed my browser like a dumbass.
Here, I'll give you a
But
second to
I
find
have
it.
it. Okay.
Yeah, no,
Thank
I
you.
was just it's funny in the tradition that I practice. We use fat as that, right? It's this like explosive, like plosive sound, right? That's supposed to basically just go off like a Vajra nuke in your mind, just to sort of like obliterate that space and leave it in that luminous emptiness. But I think it's profoundly interesting the way that we use like physical sounds, even like uttered mentally, to accomplish these really powerful sort of like metaphysical operations. I don't know. It's still fairly new to me. So I have that sort of like novice's enchantment.
Well, I will say that I still love Vajrayana, like despite what some people might say about me, I do love Vajrayana. Still think Dharma's the best, still is Dharma supremacist. Not saying it is, and just I like it. So I agree with you, Solar, that it's not, but it's not just a novice thing. Like to do like okay, so I gave the example of Oma Hong, but technically what Solar said is correct. The put or the pay, depending on your teacher or your school, your pronunciation. Rom will be familiar with both of those because they haven't decided 100% in Tantra which ending pronunciation they prefer. So, and Indians do pronounce the same mantras slightly differently. So there's also something interesting about that. But that's okay. It's okay. We know that we talked about this Shabar mantras last week. Those are colloquial language mantras, still potent, still powerful. There's blended mantras. One of the most famous Durga mantras is actually has a Tamil word in it. So if you're familiar with the Chamunda, not the scary Chamunda, the sunken one, but the Chamunda that is Durga. It's Durga, but she appears as Durga, we'll say, but she is Chamunda. But the Chamunda mantra, which I believe is, let's see. Okay, Om Aim Hrim Klim Chamundaye Viche. Viche is a Tamil word, and it refers to the shield, like a buckler. So that's also very interesting looking at Psalm 91 because there's a buckler invoked in that psalm. So it is like the shield, like if you look at a picture of Durga or Chandika riding a tiger. So this is very specific to this mantra. But if you look at a picture of her riding a tiger, she will hold a buckler in one of her hands. It's one of her divine weapons. So that is the invocation of that weapon. So I just thought I'd point that out. But yes, the put is the expansion into space of the wrathful. It's not always wrathful, but usually, I mean, put only appears in wrathful mantras. So yes, what Solar said, 100% correct. And that is like when you would clap your hands. So it's the expanding sound. It's like how the wave of your will or maybe of your consciousness. It's how it rides outwards. So okay, Matt, sorry, go ahead, please.
It is very interesting that you bring up Durga mantra because if you say it again, but slowly, we have Om, Aim, Hrim, Klim, Namo Namaha. So we've been talking about Aim a lot of the time in the space, and then you see it again on the fucking mantra after Om. So that's very interesting that it just came up.
Oh yeah, there's a clear relationship between the Sanskrit bijas, both of Indian Tantra and Buddhist Tantra. There's a clear relationship between like I'm not sure if it's 100% mappable. Obviously, I send Solar things that I find interesting. Like if I see a Sanskrit letter and it reminds me of something in Hebrew, I do send it to him. Now, do I think it's like definitive proof that it's like all one thing? Yeah, for me, probably yes. But for other people, it's okay if they don't see the same thing, but I do. And I think that it exists. And I think there's a clear relationship. Again, it might not be one to one. So I think that that's also important to keep in mind. Okay, Matt, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, and well, I'm very biased because I like the archaeometer, but that's the point they make there, that there's this clear, they call it like proto-synthesis, let's say, that you can connect stuff, which obviously will not be necessarily one-to-one, but there will be things that you can connect to. So if you can look at the astrological thing on the, let's say, the letter, then you can relate them. That's at least how they do it in the archaeometer. They relate by like color, sound, and astrology. And yeah, I think that's it. Those three.
That is the relationship. So like when I mapped the Mahavijays onto the tree, there were other people who had done the same thing, but I didn't agree with their placements. So I totally did my own thing with my own logic. And I think that that makes sense to me because I related it along those exact correspondences: astrology, color, and sound. But the sound I wasn't 100% clear on in the Kabbalistic way, but I know all the bijas for those goddesses as well as other deities. So I was kind of able to think through it conceptually and what those bijas mean in a subtle way rather than the gross sound of like seeing if they correspond to the sound, the actual sound of the Hebrew letters. So I did it more, I took it more as a conceptual layer rather than a sound as a significator of meaning. So I 100% agree. Obviously, we should shout out that Matt is undertaking a huge project with the Archaeometer. I don't know how many episodes he has. I think 2. Is that right, Matt? 2 episodes?
No, I think it's 4 already or something.
Okay, so I'm 2 episodes behind, obviously, so I apologize. But I have watched 2, and it's excellent, and it's really incredible that Matt is undertaking such a cool thing and something that's very unknown in English. And interestingly, it does seem like there's a lot of unknown esoterica that is not reproduced in English or not even well known, even in the Anglosphere. And we've talked about this before. And there's a difference in grimoire preferences between like Spanish, Portuguese, English, French speaking colonies. There's differences in all those 4 distinctions. Like there are actual magical practices that did not get included in like those canons, which people will say, oh, it's just European. Well, there was obviously very distinct identities of the people were doing very distinct things is what I'm trying to say, but there is clearly a proto, I like that word, proto um, synthesis or proto syncretism that speaks to the primordial, I don't know if you want to call it like a hyperborean system or hapaborean system. That's more obviously referring to the future or futurist, but yeah, I think there's something there. I think the seeds are primordial, so of course they exist in multiple systems. Now, this is an interesting thing about the here, because what is the here but the mage? So, depending on the mage and their language, their maternal language, they're going to hear different things just because you make sense of phonemes and morphemes. I think that's right. You make sense of the sounds anyway. You make sense of the sounds that you're primarily accustomed to as a child. Those will always hold the most meaning for you. So, but of course you can learn, like look at Matt, look at Solar. Like, we're all multilingual. I'm probably the worst multilingual up on the stage right now because my Bahasa and my Chinese, both dialects are pretty bad, but you know, I passed university, so I I exercised the potential where it mattered. So, okay, so that is that. And but yeah, you resonate. So you'll hear the things, but you'll interpret them in a different way. So the container, the vessel you put around the word that you hear, yes, it's the exact same word. But if I grew up speaking a specific language, I'm going to interpret it in that way. So that's why you have differences in these things that we are all, I think we're collectively sort of at least passively, maybe relatively agreeing are primordial. So yeah, you hear them in different ways, and that's why they appear in different ways in different systems. So I had hoped to get through the whole thing. I think we did. We said the clap, so we ended up part 5. So it's not quite the ending, but I think it's a good place. I mean, we went on for 3 hours almost and 30 minutes. And so I think we can close out now. Do Matt and Solar have, and Joshua, of course, if they have anything to say as the co-host, please, please say anything you want to close. If you want to plug, Matt especially. obviously Joshua as well. Solar is obviously welcome to vlog too. But anything you guys want to close out with, and then we will do room shoutouts and we'll end.
Okay, so I think I can quickly shout out. So yeah, if you like this kind of crazy stuff that we talk about, make sure to follow all of us, obviously. I don't know, Solar doesn't seem to post that much, but when he posts, there's for sure a banger there. So make sure to follow all of us. And I have my website in my bio. That's already putting a lot of stuff there for free because I like the idea of people knowing different systems and different things. So there's a lot of like tools and content and this kind of stuff. I'm also building some coding libraries. So eventually, I just want to see a billion of those apps being made. Don't want to hoard all of that. So yeah, if you like this kind of stuff, make sure to check it out. Posting also content there every now and then, and my other channels like YouTube and whatever. Like usually I post everything on X anyway, but if you prefer the other platforms to watch videos, I'm there as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. Joshua and Solar, if you guys want to plug, please do so. I do agree with Matt. Like Solar is a great to know him personally is not to know the timeline Solar, but the timeline Solar matches perfectly with the group chat Solar. So it's the when it happens and it's hilarious and it's worth retweeting. So shout out to Solar for that. And Joshua, please plug you anything you want. Obviously, Chris from the King of Cups was in the room. I'm obviously undertaking a 4-part series on a huge canon, Avatar: The Last Airbender. We're also doing Korra, so we are doing the 3 books plus Korra. So I think we'll do something really interesting with it. He was a great person to work with, and thank you again, Joshua. I did say this at the beginning, you weren't here, but I thank you for introducing us because it was a really good collabo and it was a good energy and yeah, I think it'll be really fruitful.
Thanks, man. We already pre-recorded an episode with Mario from Symbolic Studies, who was also here earlier. We'll be premiering that on Good Friday. It's symbolism of the cross, so it's pretty packed with some stuff. And yeah, you guys, you and Chris recorded earlier today, so yeah, look forward to that. I just had one comment about the clap. And I don't do this every time I pray because I don't like to develop a habit of praying, praying a certain way. But when I really do feel like I'm in the zone, I guess I usually will clap my hands together in the prayer gesture and then do my like blessing or whatever it might be, even if it's brief. But because I feel like that clap sensation, like Matt mentioned earlier, it brings circulation to the hands. It gives me sensation. Also, it's the audible clap. But in masonry, that's when your blindfold is removed. Everything's dark, and then they got you blindfolded. And then when you're finally brought to light, it's everybody claps around you, right? So when they take it off. So I just wanted to mention that usually coincides with them turning on the lights and stuff like that. So there might be some element of sonoluminescence there where sound creates light, right? So anyway, I just wanted to comment on that. Thank you. But that's the yods, 2 yods clapping together to form light and the ayin. Anyway, thanks. Love you all.
Thank you, Joshua. We love you too. Awesome dude, great Lodge-Aeon, and I just want to say thank you. Special shout out to all 3 of my co-hosts, so Matt Mora, Solar Exile, and Dr. William Birkin, Joshua the Branch. Obviously, these spaces wouldn't happen without the greater Grey Lodge, so that includes John, Phoebes, Watercolor. Thank you for coming. Beth, you are a lodge member, even though you're not technically a lodge member. You've just reached the threshold of how many spaces you've attended and how supportive and cool you are on the timeline. Thank you so much, Beth. Flower Power. Shakti, of course, the spaces began with you coming to them at the very beginning. I'm sure you were like, who is this crazy Westoid? But I'm so glad to have got to know you and We appreciate you greatly. Joseph Reed, also the same. Thank you so much for coming to the spaces. We all appreciate it. Thank you from Jin, myself, and the Grey Lodge, because it wouldn't happen. It really wouldn't happen. Like, who cares? Who the fuck cares if 200, 500, over 1,000 people listen to some of those Aeon of the Daughter episodes? Who the fuck cares? Because what matters is that we do it all in perception together at the same time. We're all in the space at the same time. I can't see all those people listening. I can't see all those people like that. They don't listen, and they don't show me in the room. So I don't really care about them. I care about like what we're discussing, who I'm discussing with, and the people that I recognize. And of course, I cannot end without saying thank you to I would just say the secret. I mean, all Singaporeans are essentially comedians in a dry, kind of upstairs, downstairs way, but no one is funnier than Rom. Love Rom. Uh, he's just a great. I just love Rom. Okay, so just let me have that moment of loving Rom. But I love all of you, and I appreciate it. And we've seen each other through this tumultuous. We'll say 6 months, the last 6 months. It's been a little up and down, but you know what? The spaces continue. The spaces have become more fun for me. The spaces have become more interesting, more dynamic, and I'm so glad to see I have regular co-hosts. That's what it was always about. Because I don't need a solo project, right? Like I can just do my show. Then that can be all the gin that people will get. But this was always interesting because it was always intended to be a collaborative project between like the group and myself and with each other. So obviously, when that episode Joshua drops, please link it in the chat. I don't always see your guys's tweets on the timeline, which is really unfortunate because I know I really need to pare down my following count. But it's hard, actually. It's not as easy as it sounds. So, because I follow people sometimes because they follow me. So, I feel bad. Anyways, this is neither here nor there. We're going to close it out. But please link anything you ever want me to see into the chat or DM me the tweet, and I'll, of course, retweet it. I just don't always see it. So that's my own fault. So I'll deal with that. But okay. So this was the Grey Lodge. I'm Jin the Ninja. I host a show called Threshold Saints. Friday Night Gnostic Mass. This is our third one of. We had one in or two in January, but then we kind of, I stopped doing them for reasons that we all know. And then we have now restarted, and I can't say I've had more fun doing the last three than I had doing the Sunday Kabbalah classes, which I always enjoyed, but I was always a little burnt out doing. So now this is like a reinvigoration, a really great way to think about reality. We didn't talk about politics, but that's okay. I don't think we always have to. And I think that we do in a specific way, and you can think through the things that we said in a political way. But of course, really think about things through, really think about things in the way that there's an implication to reality. So I think that also makes sense for the clapping and why we do it. And I actually think that's a good practice. So Rom just popped back in. Rom, we did shout you out. We said we loved you. We said you're hilarious Singaporean, bro. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you all for coming. If you're listening back to this in recording, follow everyone who is a speaker. Don't quote tweet me. I'll quote tweet you back. That's pretty much it. Okay, thank you guys. Next week we will resume the Donald Michael Craig book, Modern Magic, and we will maybe discuss a little bit of politics depending on how the timeline looks. So all go out into the world and be timeline warriors, psi warriors with strong discernment and strong psychic defense against the tumult of the Aeon in flux, which is the Aeon of, as for at least tonight, is the Aeon of the Magi. So thank you so much, guys. Have a great night.